What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 243. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line, Wong Kenobi, Brian Wong.
Marshall, friends don't let friends play Ornithopter. And I really needed a friend on Saturday. Where were you?
I was pre-releasing, but I decided to go at the shop very close to my house instead of making the drive because, well, they emailed me and they were like, hey, we need people. And I was like, okay, sure.
Okay. Well, that's a good reason, but
I was battling against ornithopters, though.
Well, I played Ornithopter and I went 2-2. I guess we'll get into that next week, but yeah, I really needed a friend, Marshall.
Yeah, okay, well, I'm still your friend. You know who else is my friend? CardKingdom.com. Great place to buy Magic cards. This is the M15 Rare and Mythic Rare set review show to complement the show that we did last week on commons and uncommons from M15. And, you know, one great thing about Card Kingdom is that you can pre-order stuff, right? You can get stuff ahead of time so that once it becomes available, they start shipping it to you. And as we've discussed at length on the show before, they ship very quickly. It's one of their biggest selling points as a card shop, as an online card shop, is that they get you the product quickly. And we have seen some insane turnarounds, but the main thing is they're reliable. Like, you know that they're going to get it to you as quickly as they can. They never have that thing where, you know, you're kind of like, hey, have you guys shipped this yet? It's just, you don't have to worry about that with Card Kingdom. They have a proven system that works very well to get their product out the door as quickly as possible. I also wanted to mention that I brought down another order of stuff to them, mainly limited resources stuff. So the sleeves, the deck boxes, and the playmats are all in stock at the time of this recording, and you can get LR branded gear at Card Kingdom right now. And I think it's cool to be able to share that with them too, to have the show stuff on there. But for everything you need, singles, sealed product, including things like the limited resources sleeves, but also any sleeves that you might want, any other dice or supplies that you may need. They have it all. So please do check out cardkingdom.com. Brian.
Yes.
Walk us through real quick the grading system again. We talked about it last week, but I like to put it at the beginning of these set reviews just in case somebody's coming back, from the future to listen to one of these.
All right, so we're going to give the cards a grade, and it's similar to the grade you would get in school in the US system. So we have A's, B's, C's, D's, and F's. So A's are usually Stone Cold Bombs. These are the best cards in the format, and they will usually win you the game, almost regardless of what position you're in when you cast them. B's are cards that make you want to play that color. C's are cards that really fill out your limited deck. And in limited, you can't really get away without having C's. You're going to have quite a few. They're just role players. They don't really move the needle necessarily, but you're perfectly willing to play them. D's are cards that I would consider playable, but I would prefer not to. But in a pinch, if you have to, okay. And F's are cards that I do not see myself ever casting throughout the length of the format.
Very good. So we're going to be starting with white this time. We're going to go through the mythics and the rares together, so we're not going to split them. We brought them up on Gatherer this time because the card image gallery has been taken down. Mm-hmm. And frankly, because MagicCards.info didn't have M15 up yet, and that's the one I use in my day-to-day stuff. But Gatherer does a fine job as well, and it has a recent revamp, so it's probably worth taking a second look at anyway. First card is, well, it's a Planeswalker. It's a Johnny Steadfast. Now, Planeswalkers generally in limited are incredibly powerful. Mm-hmm. They usually warp the game around them. Even if, there's a lot of Planeswalker debate that you'll see when they come out. Well, it doesn't protect itself or, whatever. In limited, that kind of goes out the window. Basically, all decks are creature decks of some sort or another, and Planeswalkers will usually have some friends in front to help block, and whether they protect themselves or not becomes less relevant. If you're a control deck in Constructed or whatever, you're going to want to play a Planeswalker that can protect itself from your opponent's creatures. Here, you're going to have your own creatures to do that. So a Johnny is a 4-mana Planeswalker, 3 and a white for a 4 loyalty. Pretty good start there. Easy to play, splashable, and only 4 mana. The +1 ability is until end of turn, up to 1 target creature gets +1/+1 and gains first strike, vigilance, and lifelink.
That's a whole heap of abilities right there.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer that you don't get any lasting effect other than the life.
Hmm.
But I guess gaining the vigilance is real nice to keep a Johnny alive and still get to attack with that creature and probably gain life.
There you go. And now the -2 ability, which you can use right away and still have a Johnny on the battlefield at 2 loyalty, is put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control and a loyalty counter on each other planeswalker you control. Now, the other planeswalker you control thing is only for the luckiest of the lucky. That probably won't happen in limited. But the first ability is still incredibly relevant. Put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Wow.
Mhm. Yeah, especially that I've kind of pegged white as the token. It's really like a token army strategy that you're gonna be doing. So that -2 ability to just put a +1/+1 counter on all of your triplicate spirits, all of your soldiers from Raise the Alarm. That's excellent.
Yeah. And then the ultimate, which is actually within range when you look at it, because a Johnny comes down on 4 loyalty, and then if you +1 a Johnny, immediately goes to 5. So, the first turn you have a Johnny on the battlefield, you've got him at 5. The ultimate comes at -7. So a few turns after that, you could potentially fire this off. You get an emblem with, if a source would deal damage to you or a planeswalker you control, prevent all but one of that damage.
Now, that's not one of the most impressive
No,
ultimates I've seen.
it's
Like
really not.
I actually consider that one fairly beatable. Most of these emblems are meant to be that the game is over. Like you let my planeswalker go ultimate, but I feel like this one. I mean, you're going to be a favorite to win, but you could still lose.
You could definitely still lose. It feels like the most powerful effect is right in the middle, right? The -2. You've got 3 creatures, no matter what they are. I don't care if they're 0/1 plants, 1/1, tokens or whatever. If you start firing off a Johnny Steadfast at -2, your creatures are going to outclass your opponent's creatures very, very quickly. If you're in a racing situation, a Johnny Steadfast is awesome. You come down, you've got a 5 loyalty planeswalker, and you've got a blocker, a creature that basically isn't going to be tussled with in combat for the most part, and you're going to gain some life. So now your opponent has really tough decisions. You've got a blocker back. They've got to decide if they want to attack a Johnny or you. A Johnny's got 5 loyalty at that point, so it's not like it's going to be easy to kill a Johnny. And if they're trying to race you and they're starting to attack a Johnny, well, that benefits you too. So there's a whole lot of upside there, and for both the +1 and the -2.
Yeah, I just think it's kind of a bummer that usually planeswalkers are super threatening, just because of their ultimate going off. And this one, if your opponent has a Johnny and not much else going on, I mean, obviously you want to kill it, but it's not like, oh, I'm just going to lose if this goes a couple turns.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that's actually, in some ways, secret tech. I don't know how many times I've had a Planeswalker Unlimited where I was ticking it up, but it really wasn't doing much, and the ultimate wasn't really going to, crush the situation.
Yeah.
And my opponent just started blindly throwing
Yep.
resources into getting my Planeswalker off the
Yeah,
battlefield.
that's one of the main appeals of planeswalkers, basically all of them in limited, which is it usually forces your opponent into uncomfortable bad attacks. They can't wait. If you have any type of trick, you can usually blow them out because it's like, oh, that they're going to attack. They had to. They can't sit around and wait. We'll see how people react to this at Johnny when it's actually in play. I mean, it's not the scariest ultimate, but still, usually you can't let planeswalkers live.
Yeah. Now, the one thing about a Johnny that's a knock, though, is that you do need creatures. Like, if you find
Yes.
yourself creatureless, a Johnny doesn't do a whole heck of a lot.
No, it will prevent 5 life.
Right.
It'll prevent 5
and that's a
damage to you.
big deal. I mean, most planeswalkers come down and kind of have their own thing going, and a Johnny doesn't. He needs friends. So,
Yeah.
where do you put a Johnny on the scale, a Johnny Steadfast?
I gave it a B plus. I don't think it's quite a bomb. I think it's a good card, but
I'm in B plus too. I'm
Yeah.
gonna first pick a Johnny a lot of the time. I mean, if I open him, I'm taking him. Nope, and not just for value. Like, I think he's easily that powerful, but it doesn't quite enter that thing of resolve this spell, and all of a sudden you're just unbeatable. Like, it does need some help. If you're behind, and especially on creatures and stuff, a Johnny definitely is a card that could not get you out of it. I mean, you might still just die the next turn.
yeah. If you're behind on board and you have one creature in play, a Johnny's really not that great.
Right. So let's keep things in perspective, but still, a Johnny, I think, is a pretty easy first pick.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Avacyn, Planeswalkers always demand a lot of talk. We're not going to talk quite as much about all of the cards as Johnny Steadfast. Avacyn Guardian Angel is an interesting one. It's a 5/4 flying for 2 white. So very demanding mana cost, but really nice. 5 mana for a 5/4 flying vigilance.
Yes, absolutely. Already, I'm first picking that card already.
Yeah, that's a first pick quality card, though, with a little footnote of You got to be really white. Obviously
Yes.
not splashable, but even beyond that, you want to be in the 10-7 range to be able to get Avacyn down when she matters. Now, she's got two abilities, and also I should mention that she's a regular rare. You would guess that this is a mythic rare based on being like some mythic angel or excuse me, legendary angel, but it's not. It's just a regular rare. 1 and a white. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to another target creature this turn by sources of the color of your choice.
Right, so she cannot protect herself, which is a big deal. Makes her more susceptible to removal than she would otherwise be.
Right.
Although with her 4 toughness, that she's pretty safe to removal as it is.
Yeah, pretty sweet that you can attack and block with her, though. I do wonder how careful you really want to be about blocking with Avacyn. But it's only 2 mana to prevent all the damage, and that can be from burn spells or creatures or whatever from that color. Also, another ability, 5 white. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to target player this turn by sources of the color of your choice.
Yeah, some decks are just going to be cold to this.
Yes.
That is a very rough ability for a lot of green-white decks potentially. You might not have answers. So I really like that just potentially win the game factor. But she doesn't just sit around and stall. She kills your opponent in a hurry.
That's the thing.
As a 5 power flyer for 5 mana.
With vigilance too. Yeah, I think I think that where I want to focus our review is on that, and is on the fact that yes, there's some pretty nice activated abilities that could certainly be good and useful, but in the meantime, like you never get to 7 mana because your opponent died before you got there.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And she allows your creatures to attack very well on the ground as well, just because of her 2 mana ability to prevent damage to them.
Yeah, and remember, it doesn't make them have protection, but it does prevent. So what do we give Avacyn Guardian Angel?
I gave her an A-, but you really need to know that with that triple white and the mana cost, you're going to want to have 10 planes in your deck. You probably 10 or more. And like this is not the first white card you draft in like pack 3. Like you can't do that. It's too late.
It's too late. Yeah.
You're going to need to be majority white. So I would say at least 9 or 10 planes.
I'm totally on board for A- as well for Avacyn Guardian Angel. This next this next one is Hushwing Gryff. Hush. It's 2 and a white for a 2/1 Hippogriff. That's pretty cool. It's a rare. It's got flash and flying. So let's take a quick time out to do a little French vanilla test here. Brian, how do you feel about a 2/1 flying with flash for 3 mana?
I'm not in love, but I've played it.
Okay. And it's got an extra static ability. Creatures entering the battlefield don't cause abilities to trigger.
Yeah, so
how relevant is that for limited?
I would say this is primarily a card for constructed, although, with its body, you can definitely play it in limited. But yeah, that ability, you can prevent a Frost Lynx from triggering. You can prevent a Forge Devil from triggering. It's going to be really hard to really expect the results of this. Like each deck may have an average of, 1.5 things that this actually affects.
So you're really going to be playing it for the 2/1 flying flash primarily.
Yeah, and if your deck has nothing that this hurts, you gain a little bit of upside. But that's not really why you're putting it in your deck. You're putting it in your deck because of the body. And if you do manage to, get a bonus out of that ability, sure, that's great.
Yeah. I think one thing to remember, too, when you actually play with Hushwing Gryff is that when your opponent puts their creature on the stack, that like they're put their Frost Lynx on the stack, you need to play your Hushwing Gryff now. Like you don't wait until the Lynx hits the battlefield.
Correct.
Because then it's too late.
Right. But I think, strategically, it's going to be pretty hard to take advantage of this. It's going to be, pretty few and far between when you can actually use this, kind of cleverly. It's just going to, sometimes it will happen, but sometimes it will mess you up as much as it messes them up.
So what do you think about a C+ for Hushwing Gryff?
I'd say it's a little too high. I'd say it's really not much better than, that crow in black. I'd give it a C.
Okay. Yeah, I like it a little bit better. I don't like that it dies to the devil.
Sure.
But at the same time, I do value flash fairly highly. Like you can use this to kill some creatures that white normally would have a hard time killing, just like small things on the ground or, high power, low toughness creatures that you can block with if they don't see it coming. So I'm going to go C+ on it.
I think Flash is a good ability, but it's much less appealing on a creature with 1 toughness because you can't get value. It's not like you ever just eat a thing. That it's at best you trade.
Yeah, that's a great point. Mass Calcify is next. It's 5 white for a sorcery. It's a rare. It says destroy all non-white creatures.
Yeah, so this is a card that's going to vary wildly, from game to game and how powerful it is. If your opponent is playing a deck with, half white creatures, you probably don't even want to play it.
No way.
But against some matchups, this is going to be maybe the best card in your deck. So it's going to have a huge variance. For that reason, I would never give it a super high grade. If the more white your deck is, the better it is.
Right.
Clearly.
That's the
Um,
thing is that you can make this approximate a one-sided wrath, and that
yes.
is worth 7 mana.
Yeah. No, I mean, this card will just win the game a significant amount of time that you cast it. um, if you do get full value, you keep two or three things in play and you wipe their board. Like that's it.
Yep, that's the
uh,
game, boys.
yeah.
So what do we like here for Mass Calcify?
So I put a ceiling on any card that I think is just like an automatic sideboard out in like in like a relevant number of matches. I think that caps like around a B. So that's what I would give Mass Calcify. But we'll see how easy you can get to 7 mana in the format. But I think because it does have that one-sided wrath potential, it's a lot of power. So yeah, that's why I'm going B.
I'm gonna go B minus. The 7 mana is pretty rough sell. Like there's gonna be some times when you just die before you get to cast it, and that's always really rough. But yeah, the allure of the one-sided wrath is definitely there. Preeminent Captain is 2 and a white for a 2/2 rare Kithkin soldier with first strike. How does that rate for you so far?
That's about a C.
Yeah, 2/2 first strike, maybe C plus. Like that's
Sure.
decent.
Yeah.
Whenever Preeminent Captain attacks, you may put a soldier creature card from your hand onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking.
Now you may be wondering what soldiers can you get in the format? Well, I am your man. So
All right.
the white Paragon, that's the 4 mana creature
Mm-hmm.
that pumps all of your white creatures. That'd be a great thing to put into play at instant speed. The rest of the things you can get, you can get a couple of the 2 drops, like the Skirmisher, and there's another bear, and you can get Midnight Guard. So those are the things you get at common and uncommon. So nothing,
not super exciting.
not super exciting,
I
but
mean, remember it's attacking as
it's
well.
attacking, right? So if you get that Paragon or you get that Kinsbale Skirmisher, that's pretty cool. That's a nice upside, but it's not like necessarily bomb potential.
Yeah, I'm not super high on the captain. It asks quite a bit of us, and with only having 2 power in first strike, it's not that exciting. Like you get up into 3 power first strike, and now you're talking business.
Right.
2 power is like just okay. It kind of wants to be augmented.
Right.
I personally don't put this card too highly. There's not really a broken play that you can make with it. And what are you going to do? Start like prioritizing soldiers? I don't think so. Like, if I have the Paragon in my hand and the board's empty, I'm pretty happy because I get in for an extra damage with the captain and I get a free spell. But a lot of times I think you're just going to want to play the Paragon and then attack with the captain because Paragon just ends up getting blocked by like anything.
Yeah.
So
you gotta worry about that.
yeah. So I think I'm not too high on preeminent captain. I think, it makes the cut. Like there's not a lot of downside to this card, but it's also not really that exciting.
Yeah, I actually give it a little bit of a bonus because it has the ability, and whether or not the ability is that good, people are going to be scared of it. I think this is going to be a lightning rod.
Mm-hmm.
People are gonna kill this if they can do so, reasonably. Whereas they wouldn't necessarily just pop off a lightning strike to kill your Witch's Familiar, even though the cards might be similar power level.
Okay, so what did you give preeminent captain?
I give it a C plus. I just think it's a pretty reasonable body. It'll come down and fight, and I do think people will be scared of it.
I'm totally on board with C plus.
Right.
Resolute Archangel is 5 white for a 4/4 flying rare angel. When it enters the battlefield, if your life total is less than your starting life total, so for our purposes 20, it becomes equal to your starting life total. So whatever it was at that was below 20, it becomes 20.
That is a very powerful ability.
Yeah, you can gain 19 life.
Yeah. This is one of those cards that when you're just getting beat down and you don't know what's going to happen, when you start slamming on your deck and you're like, please, this is the card you're thinking of.
Yeah,
right?
like after you flood it out a bit.
Yeah, this is the card that could potentially really save your life when no other card could.
Yeah, I think the thing to remember about Resolute Archangel is that the life total helps, keep you from getting bum rushed after you've played it. But you've also got a 4/4 flyer, which is a really great blocker.
Right. The benefit of gaining life is that it buys you more time to stabilize the board. If you don't stabilize the board, then you're still just going to die again. So yeah, getting the 4/4 is huge. Like that's a pretty good blocker. It's not a great creature, but it's a pretty good blocker. A little overcosted. Usually, I'd prefer to spend 5 or 6 on that type of creature. One quick rules aside. This card changing your life total, if it makes your life total go up, that is considered gaining life, which is relevant for cards like a Johnny's Pride Mate. So keep that in mind. Yeah, I saw some people misplay that at the pre-release because this was the white promo.
Right, because
Um,
it doesn't say you gain life. It says it becomes equal, but it still
right.
does count.
Yeah, if your life total increases, that's always considered gaining life.
Okay.
But I think this is pretty powerful, and I'm happy to put one 7 drop in my deck, and this is a perfectly good one.
Yeah, it seems like a nice one for a control deck, right? Where you can sort of
Mhm.
expend resources to sort of hang in there. But
Yeah,
a lot of times in a control deck, you get to the 7 mana slot, you play it, and then you just die the next turn because they just all in attack you or whatever. And this one,
right.
that's not going to happen.
Yeah, this will allow you to continue the game making profitable blocks instead of making blocks that preserve your life total, because you started
Yes.
at 20 again, which is huge. And also just knowing this is in your hand and you're going to cast it in 2 turns allows you to play the game with more information than your opponent,
Oh
which
man,
could
you can
also,
just start racing them.
yeah, yeah, absolutely that, or just being like they would make attacks that make sense for them, but to chunk away your life total, not knowing that you're going to go back to 20 in a couple of turns. So yeah, this card this is a huge effect, cannot be overlooked.
Yeah. Come at me, Lightning Axe guy.
Mhm.
So what do you give Resolute Archangel? I mean, we mentioned that it's not particularly aggressively costed at 7 mana here. We're talking about a pretty big investment.
Yeah, I really like it. I would, I would usually reserve this kind of grade or like an A grade for a card that's more proactive. So I gave it a B. I think it's a very good card. But I wouldn't put it in bomb status.
I'm the same. I would give it a B as well. I think that's the perfect grade for Resolute Archangel. Next is Return to the Ranks. It's white, white X for a sorcery with Convoke. It's a rare.
Mhm.
So we can pay the white with our white creatures and the X with any creatures.
Correct.
Okay. Return X target creature cards with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield.
So when we're talking limited, the average number of 2 drops that you put in your deck is maybe 3 to 5.
Yeah, 5-ish, 4-ish, something like that.
Yeah, 3, 4, 5, somewhere around there. Um, I am
The
having a
average
hard
number of
time.
1 drops is like a half.
Yeah, I don't play
0.
1 drops that
Yeah.
often. Sure. It's hard for me to imagine this card having that big of an impact. I just don't, you're just never gonna be like, all right, get back 6 things. So it feels to me like kind of the upside is get back 2 things. And if that's the upside, I'm not very impressed.
Yeah, the thing that I don't like, I really actually just don't like this card at all. I don't think it's good, is that you need these specific creatures to be in the yard. But in order to make it cheaper with Convoke, you also need other creatures to be on the battlefield. So, like, what do we have on the battlefield?
Sure.
Right? Like, do we
Yeah.
have our 4 and 5 drops on the battlefield that are bigger than this? Then that's kind of what we already wanted anyway. And adding a few tutus or, bears or whatever back isn't really going to do great.
Yeah.
I'm not high on Return to the Ranks. I don't think it's very good at all.
Yeah, I don't think it's that good. I mean, also just if you just kind of consider the average case scenario, which is like getting back a couple of 2 drops, maybe 1 to 3, um, maybe 2. But so it's like at that stage of the game where you can actually make that happen, those 2 drops might not be very relevant at all. So to
Exactly.
me, I just don't really see a lot of upside. Now, if you just randomly had a deck that had 10 2 drops in it, sure, I'll play this. But
Yeah.
in your average deck, I just don't really think you should. So
Plus,
I
I
would
mean,
give
and I think we've been fair with the discussion, but I should point out that this whole discussion has been framed around, well, what are we getting back? Well, there's going to be a lot of time when you just don't get anything. Like,
right,
you just don't have those 2 drops sitting in your yard, or maybe you have just one.
right.
And this just isn't worth it in that case. You need some more upside to justify the risk of a spell that you can't even cast.
Yeah, and I just think if I'm putting a card in my deck to fill the role of give me a little more punch in the mid to late game, I'm just going to put in a large creature, most
Yeah,
likely.
just put
And
in a 5 drop.
yeah, because that thing is always going to work if you get to the mana. Whereas this card, you might get to the mana and just not even have a target or have a
Heck,
target
I
that's not
think I would
relevant.
take a 3/5 for 5 over this.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would too.
Okay. I would give Return to the Ranks. I'd probably just give it a D. Like, I can still envision, like you said, a 10 2 drop deck where I'm like, sure, get in there, Return to the Ranks. But for the most part, I'm just not playing it.
Yeah, correct. I give it a D as well.
All right. Soul of Theros, the first of this soul cycle. Let's try not to compare them to the Titans. They're not. They're A, not the
Right.
Titans, and B, they're not comparable to the Titans. They play out much, much differently. They do remind us of them, though, and that's, I think, why people have made some comparisons. So Soul of Theros is, of course, the white version of these souls. It's 4 white, white for a 6/6 mythic rare avatar. So we're going to see that theme. 4 color for a 6/6 mythic avatar. Now, this one has vigilance.
Not bad.
Not bad. I mean, look, let's French vanilla test this. A 6 mana 6/6 vigilance, that's making the cut in my deck. That's a solid card.
Yes, it is.
You know, it's maybe not super exciting, but I do love vigilance on big creatures. Like it
Hmm.
just shores up the ground so nicely. So you can pay 4 white. Again, it's casting cost in this case to give creatures you control. That's all of them. +2/+2 and first strike and lifelink until end of turn.
I mean,
What?
yeah, even if the soul is your only creature in play, that's an amount of life that cannot be erased.
That
It
cannot be
can, it
8 life
can,
a turn.
right. And the fact that it cannot be erased means they have to kill this. They have to kill Soul of Theros,
Yes.
or else they cannot win the game. Like that's just that's just a fact.
That is it. And I mean, because if when you actually map it out, you've got vigilance
Yeah.
and it's an 8/8 first strike. So there's really no reasonable combination of creatures that can block this. And the lifelink means that you're going to be gaining 8 life kind of no matter what. So Soul of Theros is ridiculous in that scenario. It's also got the same ability, 4 white, but you exile it from your graveyard. So this is if they happen to kill it, you can use it one last time, and it has the same effect. All the creatures you control get +2/+2 for strike and lifelink till
Yeah.
end of
So
turn.
yeah, even if in your opponent's best case situation where they dealt with the soul before it even got to attack, you still get to save this around, which you can use at instant speed. It just makes all of their future blocking and attacking situations much more difficult. And you can even just kind of like swing in with everything and just gain a giant amount of life, which is going to buy you more time to do your next big thing, whatever it is. So
Yeah, this card is unbelievable. Really,
yeah.
this is a limited absolute powerhouse here. Wow, they really pushed this one. And, you know, we've been talking about a medium case scenario where all you have is Soul of Theros, right? If you have 2/1/1 tokens, like now all of a sudden they're 3/3 first strike lifelinkers at
Yeah.
instant speed.
Yeah.
And I also want to note that since it costs the same to activate it as it does to cast it, when you untap, you're going to have that mana. It's not like one more mana and I'm going to take over this game. It's like, no, I've got it. I cast this thing last turn and I get to activate it this turn. So basically, it just says to your opponent, you got to win this turn. If you don't win this exact turn, you're dead.
Right. All right. So I don't know
Love
if I can give an A+ to a card that costs 6 mana,
Mm-hmm.
but this is basically as good as you can get. So I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna give it an A+.
Okay, so for me to get to A+, it has to stabilize the board when you play it better than this does. So I'm not willing to go that high, but it completely dominates the board state. This is an A. Like this defines an A for me. So Soul of Theros, A. High five.
I mean, yeah, it costs 6 and you need to untap with it. But once you do, you're in great shape.
Yeah. All right, Spectre Award is next. 3 white for an enchantment aura. Not excited about that. Enchant creature, by the way, it's a rare. So 5 mana aura. This had better be good. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from all colors, which is like, huh? But then it says this effect doesn't remove auras.
Yeah, I'm always amused that they have to put that sentence on every card that grants protection, just in case.
Yeah, on the ones that could, because I mean, if you didn't think it through, the way that the rules would work is that it would actually make itself fall off.
Right. Yeah.
Wow. Like I said, it had to be good. It is. This is really good.
Yeah, that makes your creature virtually unkillable.
It's just, it's unblockable. It's untargetable.
Right? Doesn't take damage if they manage to do any, damage to
damage,
everything. Yeah, very tough. So they're gonna have to go through the enchantment first, or kill the creature in response to you casting this. So that's the most likely way that this card is not gonna work. So you got to be careful when you cast it. Hopefully they have no cards in hand or they're tapped out. But once you resolve the Spectre Ward, that thing is basically an unkillable threat. That's a big problem for them. It does have some downsides. You have to find that window to cast it, or else take the risk. And the other thing is that it's still putting kind of two things into one creature. So if you're getting outnumbered and you're staying on defense, this isn't great. It's better than nothing, but it's not like a perfect card in this situation.
Not at all. Now, if it gave lifelink or something, then it would be, but it doesn't.
Right.
But yeah, I view this a little bit more as like an offensive threat. It can block great too. I mean, it still has protection when it's blocking, but it does feel like you want to slam this thing. +2/+2 is a big deal as well. And it basically is unblockable and untargetable and unkillable. So it just makes like a super threat out of anything.
Yeah. And in this set, there's a common, Heliod's Pilgrim. For 3 mana, it's 1/2, and when he comes into play, you get to search your deck for an aura and put it into your hand.
Yeah.
So that's a great reason to play Heliod's Pilgrim.
So like
And
you
there's
first pick this and then just keep your eye open for Heliod's Pilgrims.
absolutely. And then there's also the uncommon Boon Weaver Giant, the 7-drop, that when it comes into play, you get to search your hand, graveyard, and library for an aura and enchant that creature with it. So in that case, you get a 7 mana, 6/6 protection from all colors. That's a great reason to play the Boon Weaver Giant. So yeah, keep those two combos in mind if you draft the Spectre Ward. But you should probably be drafting Spectre Ward. I think this card's a bomb.
I think it's really good. Yeah, it just does a unique thing. Like this isn't my type of card, but I respect it. Right? Like it's one of those things where it's like this better be good, and yeah, it is. Now, one thing I want to note about this effect doesn't remove auras. You still can't put more auras on after you have a Spectral Ward, right?
No, nor can you target it with your own Titanic growth,
Right.
or your own Peel from Reality, or any such thing that you would
Or
want
your
to
own
target it with.
Ajani, Steadfast, or anything.
Right.
All right, so Spectre Ward, what do you give it? How high can you go on an aura?
I don't know if it's in the A range, but I'm gonna speculatively say A minus because I think this card is almost unbeatable.
Okay, I'm going to give it a B
All right.
because I agree with you that when you cast it and you're in a position to win, or advance your
Yeah.
situation, then Spectre Ward is unbeatable. I don't think it's a fun card at all. I think people are going to be complaining about this. But I also respect the fact that if you're getting beaten down, Spectre Ward might help stabilize the board, and it also might be just what you don't want. Making one of your creatures better isn't really
Right.
the name of the game at that point.
Yeah, it doesn't stabilize the board particularly well, but as an offensive weapon, it's almost unmatchable. And
Yes.
I just think that a very high percentage of time this card is cast, the opponent will know there is not a card in my deck that will allow me to win this game.
Yes, I agree. And there's no board state that it can't get through either. I mean, there's like
Yeah.
a few artifacts that matter, like the colorless soul of New Phyrexia that we'll talk about. But yeah, this card just narrows down the cards in the set that matter to such a big degree. So it gets a big grade, even though it's a risky card.
And I really like having this as an early pick because you can look for those two creatures that tutor it up.
Man,
and
and they're common and uncommon, so you're
Yeah.
gonna find them.
right, so you can just double or triple the number of copies of Spectre Ward that are in your deck essentially.
Yeah, because who the hell else wants those?
Exactly, you're gonna find it way more often.
Like it. All right, last white card, Spirit Bonds. This one's a little complex, but I got a chance to play against it at the pre-release, and it's good.
Sure.
1 and a white for an enchantment. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay white. If you do, put a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying onto the battlefield. Now, there's more than that, but what do you think about that?
So I would compare this to Triplicate Spirits,
Okay.
the 6-drop sorcery that puts 3 1/1s into play and has Convoke. I think it's a pretty similar card. So sometimes Spirit Bonds are going to be better. Sometimes Triplicate Spirits is going to be better. It just comes down to how much are you going to get, how consistently, when, and how much are you going to pay for it. So like Spirit Bonds is very variable because a turn 2 Spirit Bonds could give you a lot of action. A turn 10 Spirit Bonds off the top could be almost a blank.
Yes, and that's a big deal, and it must be remembered that this card is not just always good, because you
Right.
don't always have it on turn 2. Now, there's more text here. You can pay 1 and a white and sacrifice a spirit. Target non-spirit creature, weird, gains indestructible until end of the turn.
See, that's kind of cool. That's going to
really
allow,
cool.
yeah, that's going to allow you to protect, whatever your big battering ram creatures on the ground are, or your bomb. You get a Avacyn down or something like that. All of a sudden, it's going to be real hard to kill it.
Talk to me about in terms of card advantage here. So you're paying 1 and a white for Spirit Bonds. That costs you a card.
Right.
Now, this thing, how does it pay us back, right? A good creature pays us back by being a card on the battlefield. It's an even exchange.
Right.
Spirit Bonds isn't that. When you play it on the battlefield, it really doesn't do much. It's just sitting there as an enchantment. Now, when you pay the white mana, you're getting an air quotes, a free, white spirit token with flying, a 1/1. What percentage of a card is a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying?
Like 2/3, something like that.
It's pretty close, right? I mean, it's like it's a important card on the battlefield immediately.
Yeah, I'm gonna need at least probably 2 activations of Spirit Bonds though before I start to feel like, all right, I'm getting ahead here.
Okay.
So yeah, how does it compare to Triplicate Spirits in terms of power level? I think it's very close.
Okay. So are you first picking a Spirit Bonds?
See it. That's where I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, it's a tricky card.
Yeah, I think, so far as it is, I think there are a couple of uncommons I'm taking over it, like the Kurd Chieftain and the
Hmm.
Giant or whatever that guy's called.
Nightfire Giant. Yep.
Yeah, right now I'm thinking those cards are better, but I don't think Bonds is a bomb. I think it will be very good in some games, but you have to keep in mind that are those games where it's not going to be that great. Um, I think it's somewhere in the B range, and I gave it a B minus. I think it's a good card. I think you should play it, but I don't think it's going to be a consistent performer.
Okay, I gave it the same. I gave it a B minus because I feel like it's like in the middle part of the game, it really shines. In the late part of the game, it can shine, but if you draw it late, it sucks. And in the early part of the game, it's kind of interesting because like you're happy you have it on the battlefield, but it also slows down your curve a lot because you don't play a 2-drop, you play this.
Hmm.
And then your next card is a 2-drop with pain for this. So you're slowing things down a bit, but you're being rewarded in a pretty tangible way. Makes things a little awkward on some decks. I think you want Spirit Bonds in a deck that is very streamlined, right? Like
Hmm.
lots of 2-drops and 3-drops, not that many 4s and 5s. That's what you want to be spirit bonding in. But I've seen this card just take over in the mid part of the game in ways that most cards couldn't. So I give
Right.
it respect for sure.
Yeah, it's also non-token creatures. So if your deck is loaded up with Raise the Alarms and Triplicate Spirits already, you might not have that many cards that trigger it. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Mhm.
Okay, that's going to do it for white. Why don't we move on to blue
All right.
and start with Aether Spouts? What does
All
that
right.
do?
This is an instant for 3 blue, and it says for each attacking creature, its owner puts it on the top or bottom of his or her library. So this is like a potentially devastating combat trick. If your opponent attacks into Aether Spouts with, I don't know, more than one creature, they're gonna really regret it. So this is a card you probably need to keep in mind that it's in the format. If your opponent passes turn with 5 mana up, they have a bunch of blue, and you're just like, they have like 5 cards in hand. Like, what are they doing? Uh, Consider Aether Spouts there. At least think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so once you've seen it from your opponent, all of a sudden it's very telegraphed. But it's going to be hard to play around a rare that you haven't seen yet, in the draft. So this is another card. In during the draft, make a mental note of it if you pass one.
Yeah. And would you pass one?
Um, yes, I don't think this is a great card. I think it's pretty good.
Like, what if you only get one creature with this?
Yeah, then I would say that's the acceptable case. Sure. Even the person that's playing around Aether Spouts can't play around it too well because, like you said, they're probably going to still at least attack with one thing.
And that's acceptable. I mean, that's
Sure.
a like roughly it's a grip tide-ish effect.
Right. I mean, if you know that like the jig is up and your opponent's playing around it, you're probably not gonna get them for their entire team next turn if they only attacked very cautiously with one creature this turn.
Right.
So you
Right.
kind of probably just have to cast it.
And it's pretty awkward to have to leave that mana up time after time. You can't really win doing
Right.
that.
Yeah. So I think this is the card that like the first time you cast it in a matchup, you can get a huge blowout, and after that it loses a lot of value.
Yeah.
Um,
I agree.
yeah. I think it's best in a deck where you can force your opponent's hand. And the way you're going to do that is by playing a racing game. You're going to be attacking them with flyers. They can't sit back. They have to attack back, right? When they do, then you Aether Spouts. I think in a control deck, Aether Spouts is not that great, but in a more aggressive deck, I think it gains a lot of value.
Okay. What do you like here?
I gave Aether Spouts a B minus.
Okay. I think I'm going to go a little lower than that. I'm going to give it a C plus.
Okay.
I do respect the blowout potential. I agree with you on that. I think that's a big deal. But this card it does ask quite a bit of us, leaving up a bunch of mana. We have to be being attacked specifically, which might or might not happen depending on what we're kind of up to. It just feels like it's pretty tough to engineer like a full-on blowout with this card.
Mm-hmm.
There's just not that many times in Magic where somebody's attacking you with 4 creatures or 5 creatures. Like if they're
Right.
doing that, like you're way, way behind. Now this could get you out of it, and that's
Right.
respect to that. But that just doesn't come up that often, at least as often as people think.
Yeah, Aether Spouts is kind of a bummer in that it does not help you get through. Like if if you just need to get a blocker out of the way or something like that, will not help you. Unlike most bounce spells.
Right. All right. Chasm Skulker. This card is cool.
Yeah, I had this at the pre-release. So this is
you did?
this is a
Ah.
squid horror for 2 and a blue. It's a
Yeah.
1/1. and it has an ability. Whenever you draw a card, put a 1/1 counter on Chasm Skulker, which which is pretty exciting. So you start off as a 1/1, pretty fragile, gonna die to a lot of stuff, but very rapidly starts to get into Nestian Courser range and bigger. And then
And it just sits there growing. Like if the board stalled out, it's like, man, 3 turns, man. This thing's going to be a 4/4. I'm going to be beating down with this.
oh yeah, yeah, and has a very relevant ability. When Chasm Skulker dies, put X 1/1 blue squid creature tokens with Island Walk onto the battlefield, where X is the number of 1/1 counters on Chasm Skulker. So
Love it.
very important. It's when it dies. So if it is just killed by damage or by like a destroy target creature effect, but if it's exiled or bounced, you're not going to get the squids. So there are quite a few ways to deal with this that won't release the squid tokens.
Yeah. So dying is defined as being put in the graveyard from play from the battlefield. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
I believe so.
I really like this card. We mentioned Lightning Rod earlier
Yeah.
for the skirmisher or whatever he's called, but this is definitely one.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is a card that just slowly gets out of hand. Now, if you're getting absolutely stomped on, then I could see this card being one that's a little too clunky for the situation. Also, it's not a great late game draw, but being a 3-drop means that like how stomped on are you realistically getting where your 3-drop, if it doesn't, if it's not at least a 2/2 is just like a deal breaker, right?
Yeah.
Like that just doesn't happen that often.
Right. Yeah. As a 3-drop, it is going to go a long way towards playing defense for you. All you need is a couple of counters on it before you can start eating things that are attacking you, or trade with something good and get more squid chump blockers. So
Squids are sweet too.
yeah, and the Island Walk is like pretty annoying sometimes.
It's surprisingly relevant. Yeah.
Yeah. If you have any draw spells in your deck, this thing can get crazy in a hurry.
Yeah, especially instant speed ones like Jace's Ingenuity.
Yeah, I had aggressive mining, so I could draw 2 cards a turn on both players' turns.
Oh my goodness, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, but I think this Chasm Skulker is pretty good. It's a pretty sweet threat, and I think you're going to want this in any type of blue deck.
I think so too. I like this card a lot. I give it a B.
I gave it a B as well, and I think if you play it on turn 3, it's going to,
It'll do a pretty good impression of an A- if you play it on turn 3 every time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you just have to consider, okay, sometimes you're going to beat down, you draw this, it's just a 1/1 for a couple turns, and you might not be able to wait.
That's right. And of course, if it doesn't get counters on it, you don't get squid. So that's the sad part. You can't just like chump block and get a squid back from it. But
Cool card.
yeah. What about Chief Engineer?
All right, this is a 1/3 Vidalcan Artificer for 1 in a blue.
Okay.
So that's kind of your meh body,
Yeah,
playable.
it's fine. Yeah.
Not super exciting.
No.
And it has the ability artifact spells you cast have Convoke.
So
So
when
you can-
so artifacts that I'm casting have Convoke.
Right. So
Interesting.
yeah, so the common artifact that you would play in this set is that Golem, and it already has Convoke. So
Oh, the Willforged Golem?
yeah. So
Oh.
that's kind of a bummer in that, like the card that you're most likely to have, that you don't get any benefit out of. Double Convoke doesn't do anything. I kind of feel like this card really isn't for us limited players.
I'm getting that vibe too.
Yeah, I mean,
Because I
that
can
said,
see, because remember, you can tap it.
yeah,
Like you could go like Chief Engineer, tap it, play some 1-drop artifact.
right.
Like I can think of a bunch of them, but not
Yeah.
unlimited, not in M15.
Yeah, so just how good is a 2-mana 1/3 with an ability that's unlikely to be that relevant? I'd say you could play it, but you'd prefer not to.
I think you just described the looter.
Absolutely, but the looter's ability is far more relevant than this engineer.
Yeah, it's just that it costs so much, but yeah.
Right. So, historically, I've preferred to play these cards out of the sideboard, or if I'm just very desperate for a 2-drop. I just, I don't have any other 2-drops, then I would consider playing this. But, I'd prefer to bring it out of the board to block opposing 2/1s, because it does that job fairly well.
Okay.
So I gave it a D.
Yeah, it's a D. Read us Jace the Living Guild Pact.
All right, this is the new 4-mana Jace, and it has 5 loyalty to start off with, which is pretty good for a card that costs 2 UU.
That's a ton.
That is a ton. So its +1 ability is look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them into your graveyard. So this is going to help filter your draws.
So you don't get to draw a card there, though.
Right. So that's not a card advantage ability. That's a card selection ability.
So you're looking at the top two. One goes in your graveyard, and even though it doesn't say it, the other one goes back on top.
Right. Stays on
Okay.
top. And it has a -3 of return another target non-land permanent to its owner's hand.
I enjoy doing that.
I do too. Worth noting, so you can play the Jace, starts with 5. You can -3 to bounce something. Now Jace is on 2. You're not going to be able to do that again next turn, which kind of limits like the crazy tempo blowout potential. But that's still going to be pretty nice to help stabilize the game if you're using Jace to, either just be aggressive, you get to bounce at least one thing, and then make it harder to kill Jace, while you're plussing. Jace's ultimate, -8, is each player shuffles his or her hand and graveyard into their library. You draw 7 cards. Opponent asks, "What do I draw?" The answer is nothing. You lose, sir.
Receive nothing.
Right.
Wow, no squids for you.
So that to me is a much more win the game ultimate than a Johnny's was.
Much more. So they have to basically pitch their hand, and you get to draw 7.
Yeah. That's
now Jace shuffles himself in as well, right?
If you're exactly on 8 when you ultimate him.
Yes.
Like
you pay the cost -8.
That would make sense to me.
Go
but
in the yard right away.
I'm not a judge. So.
Help, Judge Showbono, help.
All right, so
you could just redraw him. That would be kind of insane.
So this Jace doesn't have any card advantage abilities until you get to the ultimate. So it's very possible that you could Jace and kind of fool around for a couple turns, and then Jace dies, and you did not gain a lot of lasting effect.
So what's the game plan then? I mean, you play Jace, he goes to 6. You're only 2 away from the ultimate there.
Right.
Is that the plan?
Yeah, Jace ultimates very quickly, but also I just think a lot of times you're just going to play him and bounce something, and then just put the opponent in an awkward spot because they want to kill your Planeswalker.
Yes.
They kind of need to, and just threaten the other bounce or just threaten, just being able to do that, essential looting effect every single turn is real nice. Set up your draws every turn.
Yeah, and then if you get to ultimate, it's not one of those ultimates that wins you the game on the spot, of course. Like that isn't the kind of thing that this does, but it puts you in like the absolute firmest driver's seat possible to do just that.
Right. Yeah.
Jay says, "I said good day, sir."
I like this card.
I do too.
I think it's a 4-mana Planeswalker that starts with 5 loyalty is a lot.
Yeah. A friend of mine at the pre-release, Lee, was like, "This new Jace sucks," and he had it in his pool, and I'm like, "Well, must be nice to be you." And he's just like, "This thing's lame." I'm like, "You're playing it?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna play it." I'm like, "It's awesome." He's like, No, this card sucks. And he just trounced everybody with it. And I'm just like, how many times did you ultimate? He's like 3 or something. I'm like, the card's just unstoppable. It's really great.
Yeah, it's so hard to kill a Planeswalker with that much loyalty that early.
Yeah.
And it's going to be affecting all your draws.
Totally. What do you give Jace the Living Guild Pact?
I'm a little worried this is too low, but I gave it a B+.
Yeah, I'm going to give it an A-.
Yeah.
I just think it takes over. Like, so good.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at Jalira, Master Polymorphist. What does that do?
This is a legendary creature, human wizard, for 3 and a blue, and she is a 2/2. So we're going to need a pretty cool ability.
Yeah, that is not a vanilla Test Crusher.
So this is an interesting one. So 2 and a blue and tap, sacrifice another creature.
Another creature, so not Jalira.
Right, she cannot polymorph herself. So if you do that, you reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-legendary creature card. Put that card onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom in any order.
So that is basically the text from the card Polymorph.
Is it?
Right.
It's been a while since I played the card Polymorph.
Well, I just mean it does what Polymorph did, which is you sack a creature and then you get random cards until you get another one.
Right. So there's a couple ways you can play this. One is you can just use it to just start upgrading your stuff. You're like, okay, I have this Raise the Alarm 1/1 soldier. I'm going to try to get something better, like a 3/3 flyer or something like that. And
you turn a squid into a real card?
Sure, you just activate this a couple of times, and you're going to get something cool out of it.
That's pretty reasonable, too. What was the wall that makes a squid?
Coral Reef.
Yeah, Coral Reef, it costs 3, and then you play this on turn 4, and then when you get to untap on 5, you get to just put that squid on the old chopping block.
Mm-hmm.
Make some calamari out of the thing.
Yeah, very relevant is that this ability can be performed at instant speed. So you can,
Oh, yeah.
which is huge. So you can block and then sacrifice. You know, it's a good play with your squid. You can do this on end step. You can do this in response to a removal spell. You can do this. You attack and your opponent, you know, blocks and plays a pump spell on their thing. You can just sacrifice your creature. So I think this card has a lot of potential to just get you value here and there, even if you're not necessarily trying to abuse it. But it's just kind of, even if your creatures are somewhat interchangeable, this is still going to be helpful. Even if you're not trying to be like, I'm trying to cheat an 8/8 into play.
That's
You know,
interesting.
I think you can just get value around the edges.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you can use it in the late game as well, just when the bears that you draw become crappy.
Yeah,
And
sure.
just try to mise into something better.
Yeah, try to get a Sphinx, try to get a dragon. I don't know. Try to get a 3/3. Who knows, right?
Right, right.
But
Cool.
I think this is pretty good.
Now it's clunky and it's fragile, right? It's
Yes.
4 mana for a 2/2, and it costs 3 mana and tapping it to activate it. So, and you have to have another creature. So Jalira is not pure upside for sure, or at least really makes you work for it. But I'm kind of sold on that it actually like affects the board enough to be good.
Yeah, and I think abusing the instant speed nature of it is pretty important.
Now, a quick question, very important for you here, Brian Wong.
Mhm.
So you would say that Jalira Master Polymorphist is a polymorph on
A stick.
a stick, right? So I had a fight with Ryan. So his take on it is that if it's a creature, it's on legs, and if it's an artifact, it's on a stick. But everybody says on a stick for anything,
Yeah, it's a beating stick.
right? It's a beat stick. Okay, well I'll try to sell that to Rye. We'll see if it floats.
Well, Ryan Spain is no longer canon, by the way.
What?
He's no longer canon in the limited resources universe.
Oh wow, you said that, not me.
But so being the creature is relevant too. Sometimes you just need to play something and block with it. So, you know, a 2/2 body for 4, not ideal, but if you need to fight with something, you can. Don't
Do
be
you think
afraid
it's better that it's a creature or worse? Like, what if this was an enchantment or an artifact?
better.
Okay, so even though it's more fragile, it allows it to enter combat, which obviously matters a lot.
Right. I would say on a truly broken ability, you'd prefer it not to be a creature. But this is not like an ability that's just gonna like automatically win you a game of Magic. This is like a bonus.
Okay, so where do you put Jalira at?
I gave her a B minus.
Ooh, that's pretty high. I couldn't decide between C plus and B minus, and I still don't know. I have to play with it first to kind of see if I'm just like spinning my wheels when I'm dumping all this mana into Jalira, or if it's like an actually really powerful ability. I'm going to err on the side of the Brian Wong and go with B minus here as well. That I really am sold on that whole instant speed thing. Like I could just see like if you get to untap with Jalira, you have a really powerful ability there.
Yeah.
And what's the worst creature in your deck? Like some 2-drop? Like, you know, sacking tokens or just sacking things that we're going to die for it is great.
Yeah, it messes with your opponent's plans. Frequently, this will be the thing that they have to kill first.
Yes, it's one of those. It's a lightning rod in that way too.
Right. Yeah, and unfortunately, you cannot sacrifice itself, so you're not going to get value when they do that.
And
Yeah.
sometimes you're going to mise into just like maybe a master of predicaments.
Yeah.
Why don't we read that one?
All right, this is a Sphinx for 3 blue, so 5 mana. It's a 4/4 with flying, so sold, already sold.
Sold. Air elemental in.
Yep. And this has a interesting ability. It is whenever Master of Predicaments deals combat damage to a player, choose a card in your hand, and then that player
my
guesses.
hand.
Yeah, in your hand.
So I pick a card and I'm like, I'm holding it. Okay.
Exactly. And then they have to guess. Your opponent has to guess whether the card's converted mana cost is greater than 4.
So if it's 5 or more.
Yeah, 5 or more.
So they say 5 or more or 4 or less.
Exactly.
Okay.
And if they guess wrong, you can cast the card for free.
That's really cool.
It is kind of cool.
You get to just free roll it?
I mean, for the most part, I would almost always just guess that my opponent's card costs 5 or more, because if they're going to cast something free, I don't want it to be something very expensive. I'd rather all right, you can cast your 3 or 4 drop for free. That's okay.
But it's super interesting, right? Like, let's say they have 3 or 4 cards in hand,
Sure.
right? It's like
Yeah.
you can just get into some like leveling war where you're like, would you really risk it, right? And that's
Right.
really interesting.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny. Like, it really limits this card's constructed potential because no one's going to let you put an Emrakul into play.
Right. But it means that you get free 4 or less. Wow, that's a lot. Like, I thought the line was between 3 and 4, but it's between 4 and 5.
Yeah, this is kind of fun.
Getting free 4 drops like in constructed, like
Yeah, this may allow you to develop your board while holding up bounce spells or removal or counters or like whatever blue
God,
would want
that's
to do.
actually sweet. Yeah, they're like, oh, I'm not going to let you get that Emrakul. It's below or it's
Yeah.
above, and they're like, you're like wrong, Jace.
Right. Yeah.
Like, do they really feel like they're getting ahead in that position? That's sweet.
Yeah, we'll leave it to constructed resources, but I don't think this card's making a dent in constructed. But
Agree.
but for me, that 4/4 body for 5 on flying, I mean, I'm already in love.
Yeah. So
And
go ahead.
I think it's a fun ability, and I'll be happy to play it. I don't know.
Yeah, I give Master of Predicaments a B plus.
Yeah, I gave it a B plus as well, which is basically if you're an air elemental with any kind of upside, you're already there.
Exactly. Mercurial Pretender is four and a blue. Oh, this is the card from the pre-release, and it's a 0/0, but you may know what's going on here. It's a clone. You can have it enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature, dun dun dun, you control, except it gains 2 blue, return this creature to its owner's hand.
Yeah, so has upside compared to clone, has downside compared to clone. The significant downside is you can only target your own creatures.
Big
And
deal.
yeah, big deal, because one of the reasons that clone is so good is that your opponent has a bomb creature, a dragon, something awesome. You just get a copy of it, and usually that's going to negate whatever they had. They're just going to fight each other and die.
Right.
So clone was kind of like de facto removal almost against any type of creature they would play. Whereas this pretender can only copy your own thing. So that's a significant downside off of clone.
Yeah, it's a big deal. That's a really
Right.
big deal.
It really is. But the bounce ability, so 2 blue, you can return this creature to its owner's hand. So one, it just can help just protect the creature. It's like, oh, things went bad. I'm going to bounce myself. Or you can use this to kind of reuse comes into play abilities. So you can reuse your Frostlinks. You can reuse your Gravedigger. You can get a lot of advantage in a long game with Mercurial Pretender if you have a deck built to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and I mean, mainly you can just switch it to something better, right?
Sure, absolutely. So it's like, okay, I was just copying my 2/2 flyer, and now, yeah, I drew a Sphinx. Let's get another copy of that.
Yeah, let's make another one of them.
Mhm.
Now it's expensive. 2 blues quite a bit. Like that's going to take up the majority of the mana for your turn to return it. But it's certainly worth it, right? If they're if they're going to kill it, or if you're really going to make a big game swinging upgrade. It's weird because I love a clone in limited, and even though this one costs 5 and has some restrictions with some, corner case, maybe not corner case, but not amazing upside, but some upside. I still love it. I think Mercurial Pretender is good. I would take it pretty early, and I'd still always play it, even with the drawbacks.
Yeah, if this card could target anything, it would be excellent. But I think it's merely good.
Yeah, merely good is sounds about right. I'd still give it probably a B minus.
Yeah, I think you like it more than I do, and I still give it a B minus.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good. Polymorphist's Jest. This is kind of funny. It's 1 blue for an instant. It's a rare. Until end of turn, each creature target player control, so you're targeting a player here, not the creatures, loses all abilities and becomes a blue frog with base power and toughness 1/1.
This is turn to frog with overload.
Yeah. It's funny because it's just 1 extra blue mana and you just get to turn everything into frog.
This card's a lot better than turn to frog.
Yeah, it's insane how much better it is, actually. It's such absurd upside for the extra mana.
Yeah, Polymorphous Jest is like pretty much as good as a combat trick can be. I think this is like near the ceiling for combat tricks. It just is going to make you win combat, whether you're attacking or blocking or whatever. Unfortunately, it doesn't do a lot if you don't have creatures in play. So, that kind of limits its potential a little bit. You need to have the more things you have in play, the better this card is, because you actually need something to eat the frogs after you've turned everything into frogs.
Exactly. One of the keys too is I think that when you play this card to not be too greedy, right? Like sometimes it is just turn to frog.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, sometimes you just have to use it as a 1-for-1 to get one creature.
Yeah. It is a little tricky to engineer blowouts, but I think that you could get a 2-for-1 out of this somewhat reliably. Inter combat, they're like block, and yeah, done.
Yeah. Yep. And like turn to frog is just an answer to a big dumb dragon that's attacking you.
Right. I like this card. I actually think it's quite good.
It has to be, right?
It
Like,
has to be. Like for the upside and for what you have to pay for the upside, which is not very much. I mean, I think Turn to Frog's playable. Like, I don't think it's great, but it's okay. And this one actually, like, there are scenarios that, albeit they don't come up too often, where you can get a 5-for-1 or something stupid off of this card, right?
mhm.
That kind of just random upside is so great on a card that is already playable just on its own, as even if it was just Turn to Frog.
I wonder if the token decks are just gonna laugh at this, or it's like,
Yeah.
all my creatures were 1/1s already, anyways.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So where do you put Polymorphous Jest? I mean, this isn't just like resolve and win the game type card here. We're talking about a trick.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely limited because it's situational. Obviously it doesn't require a crazy situation for it to work, but it does mean you need to be in combat, you need to have mana open, whatever. The more creatures you have in play, the better. Um, so it can't be bomb status just because of that.
No.
So the question is how many steps down? I give it a B. I think it's very good. I was very close to giving it a B plus.
I'm going to give it a B minus.
Okay.
I don't know why. I'm going with my gut. It's,
Well,
it's still tricky to make it work, I guess.
I think I gave Turn to Frog a B minus. So, I think you're just down, half a letter grade on me from
From
on-
turning things into frogs.
yeah.
All right, this next one. Wow. Soul of Ravnica. So here's the blue soul. So again, 4 blue, blue, mythic, avatar, 6/6. Now this one has flying. Let's not overlook that, Brian Wong. 6/6 flyer for 6 mana is going to make the cut in most limited decks most of the time. That is very powerful.
Absolutely.
And it's also got maybe, I mean, this one's not as good as the white one as far as activated ability goes. I will say that, but it is still quite strong. It is 5 blue, blue. So you'll notice that this one actually costs an extra mana to activate than the last one. Draw a card for each color among permanents you control.
Right. Which is going to be at least one because you control the soul.
Sure. In limited, for the most part, it'll say draw 2 cards.
Right.
Pretty good. And then, of course, it has that same ability if it's in the graveyard, but you have to exile Soul of Ravnica to do it, so you only get to do it once.
Yeah. And 7 mana is quite a bit for that activation. Like
It certainly is.
that's using up all your mana for the turn. So I would say Soul is not as good at stabilizing your game as some of the other ones are.
No.
Because
Especially not the white one. I mean, the white one was excellent at that.
Right, yeah, the white one's immediate impact, as we'll see later on, like the red one and green one can give you some immediate impact. Soul is going to take a while to get going. Now, the upside you have going for you is you get a 6/6 flyer, which is probably the best body of all the souls.
Yeah, 6/6 flyers on their own. Vanilla 6/6 flyer for 6 mana takes over the board quite nicely. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
What do you
and-
give Soul of Ravnica?
Yeah, so it has the best body and the worst ability, I think, of all the souls. I gave it A minus. I think a 6/6 flyer for 6 is cannot be trifled with. Like that is a very scary creature.
I'm totally on board. Remember, I think the best way to think of the activation on this particular card, the activated ability, is gravy. It's upside. If you
Right.
happen to find yourself in a stalled out position where you can't really attack with Soul and you're kind of just out of cards anyway, you play it as the last card from your hand, you draw your land for the turn, you're like, well, play my land. Sure. I mean, draw 2 cards. Go for it. Like that will win you the game eventually. The reason why we're not excited is because it costs 7 mana, so you only get to play spells every other turn. But, there are such thing as, mid-game stalemates where you play Soul and it stabilizes you but doesn't get you to the point where you can actually start attacking because maybe you're at low life total and you start dumping mana into Soul and just take over the game after a couple of turns.
Yeah, I would say most of the time the game is going to come down to whether or not your opponent can kill your Soul of Ravnica before it kills them. And as such, the drawing card ability will not be particularly relevant.
Exactly.
But, in 20% of games or something like that, you'll draw a couple cards, then they kill it, and all of a sudden you gain some advantage or something like that. But I'd say, for the most part, you're looking at a huge dragon.
Yep. All right. I like A- on Soul of Ravnica. Last blue card, Stormtide Leviathan. It is an 8-drop, Brian. It's 5 blue, blue, blue for an 8/8 creature, Leviathan at rare. Now, it has Island Walk, which doesn't seem that relevant until you read the rest. All lands are islands in addition to other types.
Mm-hmm.
So what it says is it's an 8/8 unblockable.
Absolutely.
And this is really cool. Creatures without flying or island walk can't attack. Now, the idea here is the Stormtide Leviathan flops itself up on shore and floods everything. So any land has a bunch of water on it, and now it's an island. And anything that doesn't have flying, meaning things on the ground, are now sort of floating around in the water and can't get their feet under them to attack. But of course, things with flying can't, right? Because they can just fly above the water. And of course, things with island walk can as well. So this card is interesting to me. The first thing to note, the number one thing about this card, 8 mana.
Yep. Yeah.
Huge cost. 8 mana.
Yeah. Most decks cannot support a card that costs 8.
And
the average
just
deck
like,
cannot
say that
so.
again. You know, like that's like deep breath, guys. Most decks in limited Magic cannot play 8 drops.
Correct. Yeah.
That has to be clear to you before we sort of continue with the discussion on Stormtide Leviathan, because I think a lot of people take that a little lighter than they should, and they're like, oh, it's pretty good, I'll put it in my deck. It's like, no, you need like a reason. Like your deck has to be built around Stormtide Leviathan.
Right. So if I'm going to put a card in my deck that costs 8, it better be as close to win the game as possible. And I think this card does a pretty good job of that. Because
how close do you think this is to that?
You know, I mean, other than the fact that it can be killed by like type terror effects, I mean, this card is an excellent creature because it's basically like your opponent can't attack you, and now you kill them in 2 turns.
That's right.
That's very strong. So Stormtide Leviathan is the finisher in a control deck. That's what its job is. I mean, basically, the entire point of a control deck is to extend the game, stabilize the game, eventually cast one of these things that's going to end the game. And this card does that, you know, better than most cards.
Yeah, I played this in the pre-release.
Right. So
in exactly that role.
Right. So, you know, control decks, you're going to want more draw spells than usual, like more removal than usual, because you're going to extend the game. Those draw spells will help you hit your land drops. And when you do play Leviathan, you can close the game out, even if you're behind. So I think if you're putting this card in a control deck, it's going to be very good.
Yeah, and that's what I did. My one of mine was a blue-black control deck, but this is the finisher. And I mean, just to give you an idea for what it can do, I was facing some amount of pressure because my opponent had drawn a late-game Kurd Chieftain, and also had a bunch of other random creatures that weren't really able to profitably attack at that moment. Well, until he drew the Chieftain, and then I played Stormtide Leviathan. And if you counted it up by how things went, I got probably a 5 for 1. Right now, that isn't always the case. Like you mentioned, sometimes they kill your Stormtide Leviathan, and it was your whole game plan. Sometimes they have flyers. Sometimes they just have the flyers, and they just get you with them. Right. So it's not perfect, and you need to maneuver the game so that you maybe save your removal for flyers. You know, you need to run 18 lands a lot of the time, and you need half of them. You know, you need so many lands to make this thing work. But it actually does do what we want a bomb to do. It stabilizes the board in most scenarios, and it also finishes off quite nicely. Thank you very much. 8 unblockable closes out the game really quickly.
Yeah, and you need your expensive spells to stabilize the game, because there's a good chance that you're going to be behind when you get there, because
exactly.
you had to make so many land drops, and those lands are taking the place of creatures and removal and other things that you could have been doing up to that point. So you need this thing to make up for more than itself. It needs to be pulling a whole lot of weight, and I think this card does that.
I think it does too. I actually really like this card a lot, but the looming question, and and the question that makes it pretty difficult for us really to put a realistic letter grade on it, Brian, is how fast is the format, right? I mean, there's many formats that we've played in the last couple of years where Stormtide Leviathan would never be under consideration for playability. Like, put this in Gate Crash. No way.
Right.
But there are formats, you know, like maybe M14 or something, that are a lot slower, and where the tools are there to build a really long game control deck, and then Stormtide Leviathan does act as a perfectly reasonable finisher.
Yeah. So, you know, I don't know what to give it as far as a grade. I gave it a B. I think, you know, if you're the deck that wants it, there's still, like, you'd rather have something powerful and cheap than this. But, you know, as far as win conditions go, this is a good one.
I give it a B as well. And the thing, though, is this is where, you know, thank you for listening to the podcast, because if you only heard that we gave it a B, you'd probably first pick it and just be happy. But this is the kind of card that you want in a narrow type of archetype. In most decks, it's an F. because you just never resolve it. And any spell you can't resolve is automatically an F. But in the right deck, this is definitely a B. I think this card is the finisher of choice in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
Black.
Let's go to black.
Is this Chronometon?
Maybe.
I miss Chronometon.
I do too, and I wonder if that's going to influence me in
My
a bad
little
way.
robot buddy. All right, Cruel Sadist is black mana for a 1/1 human assassin at rare. Now, this is the Chronometon thing that Ryan and I were just talking about. Black, tap, and pay a life, and you get to put a +1/+1 counter on it.
Yeah, so that makes Cruel Sadist a pretty darn good card on turn 1, because any turn, from now on out, if you're not going to use all your mana, just dump that extra mana into Cruel Sadist. That's pretty good.
I like that. And that was the whole strength of Chronometon. Now, this is a little worse though, right? You have to pay a life.
Yeah, that feels bad.
Yeah. But it's also got another ability that Chronometon didn't. It's 2 and a black, tap, remove X +1/+1 counters from Cruel Sadist. So you've built up some amount of counters over the first 2 or 3 turns of the game after you cast it, and now you can pay 2 black, tap, and remove some amount of them. And Cruel Sadist deals X damage to target creature.
Yeah, so I have in my notes here, I wrote kind of good with Eternal Thirst, and then an emoticon of a smiley face, and then I wrote, why did I put an emoticon smiley face in my notes?
So what's the lesson to be learned about Cruel Sadist from this?
I'm not sure, but I'm probably not going to do the Eternal Thirst thing, but if you did it would probably be good.
Yeah, I'm not on board for that, but I am on board for Cruel Sadist. I would play this in any black deck that I had.
Right. And yeah, it's just a pretty efficient way to just get a reasonably sized creature early in the game. Black cards make you pay life sometimes. Deal with it.
That's right. I agree with that. And also, sometimes you're going to fire off the counters and kill a utility creature or an early beater or something like that.
Yeah, there are a lot of utility creatures in this format. So things that aren't attacking and blocking that you're going to want to kill. And this is a pretty good way to do it. And against decks with no removal, they're going to have a hard time with Cruel Sadist, I think.
Yes, I agree. Where do we grade it, though? I mean, it's really hard for me to give Cruel Sadist a really high grade. A late game drawn Cruel Sadist is not great. It's okay, though. It's not great, though. Very slow in that way.
Yeah.
Not a particularly efficient creature in the sense that you have to pay mana into it every turn just to keep it moving forward. It's nice when you have an extra mana, but if you just really wanted to curve out, then you might just end up leaving your Cruel Sadist alone for 2 or 3 turns in a row, which is kind of lame.
Yeah, I gave Cruel Sadist a B-. I like it, but I don't love it.
I like B-. I think that's a good grade for it. I mean, as 1-drops go, it's one of the better ones.
Yeah, brief aside, that is the worst name in the set. Cruel Sadist. It's so boring. Just name it mean, not nice person or something like that.
Face of innocence, hand of death.
See, that would be way cool. You should get hired.
I mean, that was a flavor text. In Garrick's Wake is the next card. It's 7 black for a sorcery. It's a rare.
You should not be hired.
For plagiarism. Destroy all creatures you don't control. I'm just going to let that one sink in.
Okay.
And destroy all planeswalkers you don't control. So the second sentence, rarely relevant and limited, but the first one, holy crap.
That is a powerful ability. 9 mana. So we talked about 8 mana on the Leviathan. This is 9 mana, which is 2 more turns after 8 mana. And
it's 2.3 more. That is insane.
Yeah. That's a long ways away.
No, I can't get behind this one, Brian. No. This sucks though, because it almost says sorcery 7 black you win the game. It's in that ballpark.
See, I actually don't necessarily feel that way, because a lot of the times a game can get that far because you're playing an attrition war. Creatures are killing each other. Everything is dying. Nothing's alive. When you get to the point where you can cast in Garrick's Wake, it's not because your opponent has a lot of creatures out. If they did, you'd be dead. It's because they have a thing out.
Okay. I mean, I want to note that there is the stalemate, right, where you're both building stuff up and can't attack each other. Yeah. So that does happen, but you're right. You're totally right. If they were way ahead, I mean, you're just dead. You're not getting to 9.
Yeah, if this card costs 5, you'd have that situation all the time. But I think because the card costs 9, something weird has to happen in the game for you to get to 9 mana. you know?
Yes, like you have to flood out and not die somehow, which usually doesn't
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah, so I actually don't think in Garrick's Wake is an automatic win the game. I think it's actually going to be less reliable than the Leviathan. It also just like because it doesn't actually kill your opponent, uh, you need to find another way to win the game after you cast this. So, Leviathan closes out the game on its own because it's an 8/8 unblockable. This card is only doing half of the job of Leviathan. I think it's significantly worse, much, much worse. And it costs an extra mana.
Yeah, the extra mana is a huge deal breaker for me. Look, we can talk about this card more. We can get into the nuance of what win percentage you might have, but the fact is, you're just not resolving this on a regular basis.
No, I don't think I would ever main deck in Garrick's Wake, and I don't know what the sideboard situation would be that would make me want it. But I'm gonna keep it in the D minus range because I could imagine wanting to play this. I don't know why yet.
I do know why. I mean, there are some matchups that are very stalematey, right? Where it's like, well, you've got all the good blockers and I've got all the good blockers, and we're going to kind of stare at each other for a really long time. And that is where I want this. But I'm actually right on D minus for in Garrett's
Yeah.
Wake. And
I mean,
to be fair, it's powerful. To be more fair to the listeners, it's 9 mana, and you got to respect that. That's just not castable.
in that game, like hot soup is like 10 times better than in Garrick's
Yes,
Wake,
that's true.
and that's very sad.
Yes, that is very sad. Sorry, in Garrick's Wake, you have a lot of upside, but you cost too much. Indulgent Tormentor.
This was the black promo.
Is that a good name?
It's all right.
Cruel Sadist. Anyway, 3 black for a 5/3 flying, and yes, it was a black promo. It's a rare demon. At the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card unless your opponent sacks a creature or pays 3 life.
Yeah. So first of all, like
bonkers, by the way.
yeah, one, it has 5 power. It has flying for 5 mana.
Yeah.
Even if you have 1 toughness and no abilities, I'm already playing you.
Right.
But this actually has toughness. So it has 3. Dies to lightning strike, relevantly. Does not die to that white spell that exiles things. Also relevant. Not a great blocker. So this does not really come down and stabilize the game for you, like more like an air elemental might, because a 3 toughness is not quite not really a stop sign. I don't know. I think it's pretty good. The ability, so because this is a 5 power creature with flying, it's kind of going to kill them or not just by attacking them. I don't know how relevant the ability is. I think it's minorly relevant.
The ability's very relevant, I think.
I guess. It's like how many turns did they have to kill it anyways? It's like they have like a couple of turns to kill it anyways. If they had to like sacrifice some random token or lose 3 life or something like that.
Yeah, I think that the way you look at it is like there really are no good options. They're going to take the best option, but none of them are good. If they give you a card, then you're bolstering your chance to win the game by protecting your Indulgent Tormentor or putting out chump blockers on the ground or whatever. If they lose the 3 life, it's doing 8 damage to them a turn in a lot of cases. And that's going to just close the door really, really quickly on the game. And if they have to sacrifice a creature, it starts to work on their ability to race you. Because you do want to just pound with Indulgent Tormentor. I had it at the pre-release. I didn't choose black, but I just randomly opened one and played it. And I found the card excellent. Wow, it was good. This card really blew me away. I kind of had low expectations on the ability as well, because I just thought there's so much going on here that my opponent just is. Now they have 3 different choices of which they get to take the least impactful. But I just found that it was impactful every time. Like, even if it was a token that it was killing, it still mattered. Yeah. And Indulgent Tormentor to me is a powerhouse. I think this card's great.
Yeah, I think it for me it's right on the border of B plus A minus. Like it's in the air elemental range, maybe a little bit of bonus. Yeah. So maybe an A minus then.
All right, I'm firmly A minus. Like I think it's I would much rather have this than air elemental, even with the loss of toughness and the gain in power.
Okay.
Liliana Vess.
Yeah, this is a reprint.
This is a reprint from what, Lorwyn?
Lorwyn. She's one of the original 5 planeswalkers.
She is. She's like a hockey original team 5 or something. 3 black for a 5 loyalty planeswalker.
Yeah. You just lost all of our Canadian listeners, Michael, by butchering that.
No,
reference.
They loved my sweet reference. What do you? So you can +1 Liliana to make target player discard a card. That can be you if you have a reason, but most of the time you're just going to target your opponent, start hitting their hand. Mm-hmm. You can -2 Liliana to tutor something at the top of your library, meaning that you could search your library for a card and shuffle your library and put that card on top of it.
Yeah. So if you have a bomb hidden away somewhere in your deck, let's go get that.
And it's pretty sweet because Liliana is still at 3 loyalty when you do that, and you've got a bomb coming. -8. So a little far away, but not too bad on Liliana Vess. I mean, it starts at 6 and then plus, plus, minus, so 3 turns later. Put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control.
Yeah, you must stop them from doing that. That is
Yes,
bad.
that is really bad. It seems like it might be a little bit conditional, but I've never seen anybody lose after ultimating Liliana Vess.
Yeah, it's a good ultimate right there.
Yeah. The thing you have
Um,
to realize is that in order to get her to ultimate, you have to +1 her 3 times, and they're always ditching at least a creature in there somewhere. And often they'll be like, I'm probably not going to have enough mana to cost this 7 drop. I'll just discard it. And you're like,
Yeah.
ha ha.
Well, yeah, and also, people when you have a planeswalker out, they're like frantically throwing creatures at you,
Right.
and things are going to be dying. This is a card that's going to start fights. You don't want your opponent to have that in play. An unthreatened Liliana being able to tutor up just removal spells to help protect her even further, or like you said, another bomb, or just some kind of attrition card that if the game goes longer, you're going to win that one too. This isn't like the best planeswalker in the world because it is a 5-drop, doesn't have an immediate impact on the board at all, but is a great way to win a game for any deck that can stabilize the board.
Yeah. One of the things I love about Liliana Vess is that she sort of just passively controls the game. Like if you don't attack her, she just starts tearing apart your hand.
Yep.
If you don't have any pressure at all, Liliana can -2 and just start going to town. If you do have pressure, all of a sudden you're going to sit there and start hitting their hand. And if they're ahead, they have to start attacking Liliana at some point, and unless they have you like almost dead. And that means that you are going to have the advantage of being on the blocks. You get to block profitably, and you can try to maneuver to make Liliana great. I think Liliana is just a really good card. I would first pick her, never not play her in a black deck, and be quite happy about it.
Yeah, and in the true act of desperation, you can just play her and tutor up something that will help you stabilize if you have something in your deck.
Yeah, and then she eats 3 or 4 damage or something like that too.
Right. Yeah. So I gave Liliana a B+. I don't think she has the super pressure that some planeswalkers do. She's a good one. Sometimes your opponent's best case scenario is still pretty bad for them. They might have to pitch a couple cards and lose some creatures in the process of killing her. But it's not. She doesn't have back-breaking abilities like some planeswalkers do. So that's why I kept her out of the A range.
I give her an A-, and it's funny because the reason why I bump her up is because she's a planeswalker.
Absolutely. All planeswalkers are better than they look.
Craziness thing that happens to the board state whenever you play one in limited. And for some reason, I just found that as long as you know you have a planeswalker coming, you can kind of save your creatures and then play it, start activating it, and your opponent is just simply going to throw creatures and throw cards away to try to get rid of it. So... Necromancer's Stockpile. This is 1 and a black for an enchantment. You can pay 1 and a black to discard a creature card and draw a card. If the discarded card was a zombie, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield tapped.
All right, so the first thing is kind of a looting ability. Discard a creature card to draw a card.
Mm-hmm.
Not in love, because usually if I'm looting, I'm trying to discard lands to draw creatures, not discard creatures to draw something else.
Random stuff.
Yeah, so I don't really like that ability. So if I'm putting this in my deck, it's because I want to take advantage of the zombie thing probably, which is turning all of my zombies into 2/2s that say draw a card when they come into play. That's
right.
That would be interesting. So
that is interesting.
Here's the zombies we got at outside of Rare. We got Black Cat. We got Carrion Crow, Gravedigger, Necromancer's Assistant, Nightfire Giant, and Wall of Limbs. So I'm not discarding my Nightfire Giant to Necromancer Stockpile.
Heck no.
Not doing that. Probably not discarding Gravedigger either.
No.
And those other cards they range between meh, just having them in your deck is kind of meh, like the Necromancer's Assistant, the Black Cat, the Wall of Limbs, or Carrion Crow. I don't know. I'm having a hard time.
I'm not buying it.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time imagining the deck and the game state and all the stuff that has to happen to make this card good. I mean, it could happen, but it just feels like I would rather invest my time and energy on doing something that's going to be more consistently powerful.
Yeah, I'm just out on Necromancer's Stockpile. Like I said, I can come up with some arcane scenario where I have a decent setup with this card, but even then it doesn't feel like the payoff's super high. And That's using a lot of imagination.
Yep.
No way. Yeah, I'm out. I give it an F.
Yeah, also it is a card itself. So even the first, creature that you or the first zombie that you discard to make a 2/2 that draws a card, you didn't just get a Shaman of Spring or whatever. You got something worse than that because you had, I don't know.
You got a Shaman of Winter.
Yeah, so I think I'm out too. I'll give it an F. Just I don't think it's happening.
Yeah, I mean, send me the screenshot of the guy that goes off with it, but for the other 99,000 instances of Necromancer's stockpile, it's just going to do nothing or not make the cut.
I think it's very beatable too, even in its best case
Yeah,
scenario.
they're tapped. Yeah.
Just play like a 2/3, and they're like, oh shoot, all my zombies are worth it.
You broke it with the Witch's Familiar.
Yeah.
Ob Nixilis Unshackled. Again, this is just a rare legendary demon. 4 black for a 4/4 flying trample. Thoughts?
I usually play 6 mana 4/4 flyers more than most people.
But
There's
it's
that.
still not like backbreaking here, right?
No. I think that card is merely playable in modern limited.
Okay. It's got more. Whenever an opponent searches his or her library, interesting, right? That's not something that we see interacted with a whole lot in Magic. That player sacrifices a creature and loses 10 life.
All right, so I did
What?
not I did not query the entire set to figure out how that's relevant. It's like Terramorphic Expanse or whatever that land is that searches up another land,
Yeah.
or a couple of cards at rare like Court of Calling or something like that. So
Evolving Wilds or yeah.
yeah, I mean, not particularly relevant in limited.
Okay. And it's got another ability that actually is more relevant. Whenever another creature dies, anything, you get a +1/+1 counter on him.
That's big. That's a big.
He gets huge fast. Yeah.
Yeah. This card's great because a big flyer like this is unlikely to be reckoned with in the air. Usually their best case scenario is like, all right, you have a 4/4, they cost 6, maybe we can race. But if creatures are dying on the ground, like there's a back and forth battle on the ground, this thing is going to get ginormous.
I mean, every trade makes it +2/+2, and these are counters. Like it becomes a 6/6 flyer if you trade your bear for their bear.
Yeah. You can just the turn that you play Ob Nixilis, attack with a couple of things that that they can't just easily block, and all of a sudden like you put them in a really tough spot.
Yeah, and even if your things die or if they trade or whatever, you're pretty happy. Ob Nixilis gets huge.
Yeah, I think this card's quite good.
I like it too. I don't love it, but I like it. I'm thinking B.
I gave it B+ because it starts, it only starts off as a 4/4. But like I said, I like just random big flyers more than most people.
Wait, you gave it a higher grade.
I'm saying I gave it a B+. So what I'm saying is I tend to very much play anything that's a big flyer.
Okay, I like them too. I mean, I do. I played them a lot in Theros as well.
Yeah, there's that stupid artifact one.
Yeah, that one's okay, but also the Scry guy, the Scholar, Horizon Scholar.
When you play those cards, you usually win. They're good.
Yeah, they're really good, and this one has a lot of upside.
Yeah.
Next is Soul of Innistrad. Here's the black one. So again, 4 black, 6/6 with Death Touch, which is interesting. Traditionally not amazing on a huge creature, but actually proves to be pretty good in the sense that they really can't get away with. It limits their blocking in a lot of ways. They just take on a lot of risk. It's going to for sure kill anything that blocks it, basically. Now the ability on it is interesting. It's 3 black, so it's down to 5 mana here. We've seen one that costs 6 and one that costs 7. This one costs 5. Return up to 3 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand.
So this card is king in an attrition war.
No
and
kidding.
In an attrition war, it is second to none. But that ability is not always relevant, or maybe relevant but too slow.
Yeah, the other 2 that we've seen are essentially always relevant as long as the soul's on the battlefield.
Mm-hmm.
This one's not.
Right.
It might be, though. I mean, geez, you're going to trade creatures. That happens all the time. You can also, of course, do the same thing if it happens to be in your graveyard.
Yeah, so I think that's a very relevant exile ability. It's just
yeah.
I mean, if I'm playing any kind of control-ish deck, a grindy deck, that's just you cannot do that against me.
Right.
I'm just getting a random 3-for-1 or whatever because you had to deal with my soul in the first place. You're facing a huge card advantage battle and you're starting down 5 cards, against me or something like that.
Right. Now, the
You
Death
know,
Touch is the worst of the two that we've seen, though, right? Flying's much better and
yeah.
Vigilance is better.
Yeah, this card has a bad body and a very slow ability that's not always going to be relevant.
So what do you like for a grade on this? I mean, you're still picking it and playing it, right?
Absolutely. It's still very good. Um,
Is it an A
maybe
minus? Is it a B plus?
I'm going to go with B plus just because I if you're just getting beat down, it's so slow and it is only one creature. It only blocks one thing. It doesn't have that vigilance where you can kind of play the two-way game and try to catch up or whatever. It's just gonna eat one thing a turn on defense. You know,
Right.
it's not always gonna be, the most relevant card in play.
Yeah.
I don't think.
B plus. Stay in the Mind is 4 and a black for a sorcery. It's got Convoke. And so, of course, your creatures can help cast it by tapping to make one colorless or one color of whatever color they are. You name a non-land card. You search target player's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with that name and exile them. Then that player shuffles his or her library.
What is that sorcerer doing to Hank Schrader? That is mean.
Spoilers. This card stinks.
It's
You
it's
don't play
very
this
bad.
card. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, one, Stain the Mind should never be in your main deck because you have no idea which card you should name,
Right.
right? So I would virtually never sideboard in a Stain the Mind because it's like, so there are because you'd be sideboarding it in to name a very specific card out of their deck, but there was a pretty good chance, like a 50% chance at least, that they would go the entire game without drawing it anyways,
Right.
which means you just got no effect out of your card.
Yeah, this card's unplayable.
Yeah. If my opponent had like 3 copies of like an insane bomb rare, okay. But I'm just saying like the situation where you bring it in is pretty few and far between.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. Maybe if they have 2 souls of Theros or whatever, I'll bring it in.
Sure.
But I'm not bringing it in because of one card.
Right.
I'm
That's
not
the
doing
key.
it.
And you're never main decking it.
Correct. And I'm not bringing it in for anything that's just like, oh, you had 2 lightning strikes or whatever. Not worth it.
Right.
Not worth it. So
I give it an F. I mean, everything you described just says it's an unplayable card.
yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say I've had the situation to do this in my life maybe 100 times, and I've done it once.
Right.
So like 1% chance I would ever consider, I would ever bring this in. So D minus minus.
Okay. Waste Not is 1 and a black for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent discards a creature card, you get a 2/2 black zombie creature. Whenever opponent discards a land, you add 2 black mana to your mana pool. And whenever an opponent discards a non-creature, non-land card, you draw a card. So the key here, of course, right away is, well, how am I making my opponent discard cards?
Correct. Or how are they discarding cards upon their own volition? Are we
Right.
just like gonna hope?
Yeah. So like, what would the deck look like? I mean, because my gut tells me that this card's unplayable because we just aren't going to have enough discard to support it. What would the deck look like? Like, go extreme for me here. Like, is it having 4 mind rots? Is that what we're trying to do?
I mean, I think it's like 7 mind rots, but I think that would be a terrible deck.
Now your deck just stinks.
Yeah, because that's the thing with discard in limited is because people aren't, refilling their hands. Once their hand is empty, they're playing off the top. And limited decks tend to play off the top pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you make your opponent discard their whole hand, they can still beat you very easily. I mean, I've seen in a game of limited in Cold Snap where the opponent made them discard their entire hand on turn 2, and they still won the game.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. So, especially because that means you draw more stupid mind rots over the course of the game when they have no cards left in their hand. So it's you have all these blanks in your deck. So, in my opinion, you cannot play a discard theme deck in limited. It's okay to play a discard spell or 2, but you cannot play a discard theme deck. And this card is a card that is only good in a discard theme deck. I do not think that you can play that deck, which means I do not think you can play this card.
Makes sense.
I think this is more for, building your 60 card deck. This is not for 40 card.
F.
Yeah, F.
That's going to do it for black. Let's move on to red. Start off with kind of a controversial and cool card, Aggressive Mining. 3 and a red for an enchantment at rare. You can't play lands. But you can sacrifice a land to draw 2 cards. You can only activate this ability once each turn.
Yeah, so once each turn means once on your turn and also once on their turn.
Yeah.
If you are in the mood for some very aggressive mining.
Right. Now, I mean, this card seems to have absurd upside to me, right? Like, if you have the lands to spare, you play this, you sack a land, you draw 2, you ship the turn back, you sack a land, you draw 2, and you come back to you can draw a card for the turn and then sack a land and draw 2. You've just got 7 cards. Now you've had to give away quite a bit to do it.
Right. Yeah. So you can really only play aggressive mining realistically once you've gotten up to a pretty high number of lands in play, maybe 6, 7, or 8 lands.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Unless you have a deck that has some very high impact, very cheap spells, it's hard to do so. In limited, especially. Right. So it's like maybe you have a bunch of shrapnel blasts or something like that. You can just say, I can dig all the way down to 2 lands to hit one of those and kill you. I don't know. But I say for the most part, you're putting aggressive mining in the deck with the plan of casting it when you have 7 or more lands in play. So, or maybe
is that
maybe
a good plan?
6 or, I mean,
That's
as far
a lot
as
of cards.
Yeah, as far as cards that do a powerful thing when you have 6, 7, or 8 lands in play, this is a pretty powerful card. Like what's the comparable thing you would get there? Maybe a big fat creature. Like I think it's pretty comparable. It's just like aggressive mining is like you just can't cast it on turn 4. You can't cast it on turn 5. So I don't know. I think it's interesting. I don't think
seems like such a powerful card to me.
It is. It is very powerful.
I mean, that is insane.
Yeah. I mean, if you have 8 or 9 lands in play, you cast aggressive mining, you are probably going to win that game.
Yeah.
However, you actually get to the point if you sacrifice too many lands where you can't cast 2 spells in a turn anymore, and all of a sudden your huge amount of card advantage is mostly for naught. Also, one of the great things about draw spells is they allow you to draw more lands, to play more lands, to cast more spells at a time. So aggressive mining kind of fails in that regard.
Now, what if you have a way to get rid of it?
Well, so what are we looking at here? A reclamation sage in your deck?
Yeah, reclamation sage or something that you can draw into and then sort of. I mean, is that just going too deep? Like, is that just too much nonsense? Or
no? I mean, I think if you're looking for if you're looking for a reason to value aggressive mining higher, I think that's a good reason.
Okay.
I don't know. I think this card has big upside. I think it has a big downside. And the downside isn't necessarily that you can't play lands. The downside is you just can't cast this unless you have lots of lands.
Yeah. And I mean, it's expensive. It doesn't affect the
Right.
board. Like, it's hard to get too excited about it. But, and I do also feel like it's a little awkward for us in limited players being in red.
Sure.
It doesn't, like, what if this was blue or black, right? Now, I'm not saying that would fit the theme and all that kind of stuff. I just mean power-wise level, you could see a deck that could punch out a bunch of extra mana or just go really long and use this to just sort of clean up the late game with card advantage. But in a red deck, what do you're going to play, some goblins and then finish up with aggressive mining? I mean, maybe, but like, it just doesn't seem to be like a huge payoff there.
I do think it's an okay plan B in an aggressive deck in case you get flooded, because drawing multiple cheap creatures and cheap burn spells and stuff like that in a turn could get you back in that game and maybe even win you that game.
What if you just played a good 4-drop instead?
I mean, I would rather have Curd Chieftain. I would rather have so I would rather have a good proactive card than aggressive mining.
Okay.
So as limiting my grade, I give it a C. I think it's fine. You can play it, but you just have to understand that this is an expensive card, basically.
It asks a lot of setup costs on this bad boy.
Yeah, and it's because it's an expensive card. I know it only costs 4, but because it's only relevant if you have a lot of lands in play, that limits what it can do.
Yeah, I think the setup cost is a little too high for me. I'm going to give it a D. I think this is a card that I'll have sometimes and maybe we'll find the right deck for, but a lot of times I'm just not going to play it.
Yeah, I had it at the pre-release, and I still don't really have a good sense for it, even though I cast it like 5 times. It was sometimes good, sometimes bad. I think that's why I gave it the average grade, because I was like, okay, it's kind of going in the middle. But yeah, it's a card that is going to be great or it's going to be bad.
All right, this next one's good. Burning Anger is 4 and a red for an enchant creature. Enchanted creature has tap. This creature deals damage equal to its power to target creature or player.
Yeah, so you can kind of look at this as, if you like those cards that have fight on them, you'll really like this one.
Yeah, and it's not even fighting. It's
right.
It's hammering, right? It's just, you just crush people because they don't get to fight back.
Right. So
this card's excellent.
Yeah, the turn that you resolve Burning Anger, because you got to be pretty careful when you cast it. Hopefully they're tapped out or
you got to be
down.
really careful. This thing's 5 mana.
Right. But if you do resolve it, you get to kill something right away. Then even if they deal with it, that's still like a 2 for 2. Like you still did all right in that situation, but in a situation where they don't deal with it, they just can't win the game.
Right.
Like this is just gonna destroy everything.
Yeah. It hits
Really,
players too.
yeah, really good on a death touch creature. Like you said, it hits players. Kind of makes your creature unblockable if you want to think about it that way. Um, I, I I think this card's really good.
I do too. I mean, again, I think this is along the lines of the Spectra Award.
Uh-huh.
It's look, I don't want to play 5 mana auras, but when they make them this good, I will. Like
Sure.
this, it's always a question of, like, it's not that I have some personal distaste for them. Maybe I do, but it's really based on the equation of, well, what am I getting for my risk? And usually it's not enough. But these two things are like, no, that's enough. Like this card can take over a game, it can win you the game, and it's hard to ask much more of that from an aura.
Yeah, so I mean, you always best case scenario, worst case scenario, medium case scenario. So like the worst
Yes.
case scenario is that they just kill your creature in response, and you got nothing. So you got 2 for 1. Like every aura has that inherently, pretty much.
Right.
Best case scenario is they don't have an answer, and you just dominate the game with it. I think medium case scenario is kind of like you got to kill a thing or maybe two, and then they dealt with it, and
Yeah.
you did fine in that situation. You did pretty good.
Yeah.
So I, for that reason, I think it's good. I give it a B plus.
I'm going to give it a B minus just because of the fact that, like, it does have the setup cost. It's 5 mana. You do need a creature. It has to have medium to high toughness to be really good. If you just got like a 2/2, it's okay, but not going to take over the game. If you got a 3 or a 4, it probably will just win you the game. But I can't go quite that high. But yeah.
Yeah, I guess that is a restriction. Is you need to have something with death touch, or you need to have something with high power. Because
Yeah.
even on a thing with 2 power, it's good but not great. So
I saw somebody put one on a soul. I was like, geez. Chandra Pyromaster next is 2 red for a 4 loyalty planeswalker. And her plus ability is +1. She does 1 damage to target creature. To target player, and 1 damage to up to 1 target creature that player controls. That creature can't block this turn, which is very good. It doesn't feel like much, but that really is nasty. It kills something or it takes something out of commission for the turn as far as blocks go. You can pay 0 to exile the top card of your library. You can play it this turn, or you can ultimate her, which doesn't come up too often because the only way to it's just like plus. It's a lot of pluses from 4 to 7, but you can exile the top 10 cards of your library, choose an instant or sorcery card, exile this way, and copy it 3 times. You can pay for the copies. You can play the copies without paying their mana cost.
Yeah. So the ultimate doesn't come up too often, like you said. Although if you did have like multiple copies of lightning strikes in your deck and maybe a lava axe or something, you could use that as a win condition. Very important to know what's in your deck before you fire that off. By the way,
Yeah, for sure.
Don't deck yourself like suicidally. So Chandra, I think, is at her best in an aggressive deck where you can really use the +1 ability to clear out blockers and just make things not block, because you put your opponent in a really difficult spot, which is this Chandra is making my life very difficult to play defense. So that's going to make me start swinging at Chandra, and just they may not be able to commit those blockers to offense. That could be like the last straw for them. So if you're ahead on board and you drop Chandra, like that usually is going to win the game for you.
Yes.
For that reason.
And she does a decent job of climbing you back in if you're behind by drawing you those extra cards.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of stuff to kill with 1 toughness. Yeah, and if you just manage to, or if you just play the stalled board and protect her, yeah, basically drawing an extra card every turn with that exile ability is real good. Make sure you do not play your land before you use that ability, because you may want to play the land off of that.
Yeah, and if you don't get to play it later. It's only till end of turn.
Correct.
How good is Chandra Pyromaster?
I really like that she's more proactive than some of the other planeswalkers we've seen so far. I gave her an A-.
Yeah, I think she's an A- as well, mainly because of the planeswalker effect, but others too. This next one we'll do quickly. It's Crucible of Fire. 3 and a red for an enchantment. It's a rare. Dragon creatures you control get +3/+3. It's win more. It's not playable. It's an F.
Yeah, I mean, if my deck has a lot of dragons in it,
Then you already won anyway.
then I'm just gonna play cards that help me cast those dragons. I'm not, like things to block with before I get to 5 or 7 mana. I don't need to make the dragons better, because if the dragons work, they just win anyways.
Exactly. Next one is interesting. Goblin Kaboomist. It's a weird card. It's 1 and a red for a 1/2 Goblin Warrior rare. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a colorless artifact token named Landmine on the battlefield with red. Sacrifice this artifact. This artifact deals 2 damage to target attacking creature without flying. Then flip a coin. If you lose the flip, Goblin Kaboomus deals 2 damage to itself.
Yeah, so to parse that correctly, it makes a landmine, and then you flip a coin. You don't flip a coin after you use the landmine.
Right, and it's weird because of the way it's worded.
Yeah, so every turn you get a landmine, and the Kaboomus basically has a 50-50 chance on whether or not it kills itself after that.
But it doesn't lose that landmine.
Yeah, you'll get to keep that mine regardless.
Yeah, which is a little weird because I think the flavor is kind of like he steps on his own landmine, right? But whatever.
So there's a lot going on with this card. It's very interesting. I think it all adds up to something that's playable but not great. So one of the first things I noticed is that the landmines are artifacts, and because red and blue both have like an artifacts matter subtheme, that's actually pretty relevant. The second thing is that just getting one landmine is actually not bad. Like just being able to kill a bear that's attacking you, or 3/2 that's attacking you, or something like that, or just it just sits around, and you can use this in concert with other blockers to take down something big. Pretty relevant actually, and you're gonna get the landmine, the first landmine, pretty much every time,
right?
Unless it dies before then somehow. Another thing is that if you manage to grow the Kaboomist to 3 or more toughness, then it won't kill itself, and you're gonna get a whole bunch of landmines. So if you have
landmines,
probably the easiest way is just play the red Paragon, and all of a sudden your Kaboomist will stick around and make a whole bunch of them.
That seems sweet.
Yeah, so I think I think it's probably at its best in the Artifacts Matters deck. This is the landmines are gonna help turn on your the dog that gets +2/+0 and trample.
Yep.
It's gonna turn on that 2/3 that gains flying.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna give you something to sacrifice to shrapnel blasts or things to enchant with Ensoul Artifact. So I think it's really best in Artifacts Matters decks, but I think it's playable in any type of deck just because of all the adding up. You get the 1/2 body for a couple turns, and you get some landmines.
All right, let's talk worst case scenario. So let's say, well, maybe not worst case, but worst case, let's say that you play it, it untaps, it makes a mine, and then it dies. Okay, how much would you pay for an artifact that had red, sacrifice this artifact, it deals 2 damage to attacking creature without flying?
I don't know if I would put that card in my deck.
Probably not, right? But
yeah, it's not great.
Would you pay a red mana for that? Like, let's say it was in your
sometimes.
deck. How would you
Sure.
cost it?
Yeah, it's like a mana.
It's like maybe 1 mana worth
Yeah.
of stuff.
Plus, you got to pay when you sacrifice. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the ability to it's like 1 or 2 mana. But the upside of half the time you get more than 1 landmine.
Yeah, and they
So,
add up, and then
yeah.
it really makes combat tough for your opponent.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it all heads to a card that's fine.
Is it like C+?
I gave it like a C. I think it's pretty cool. I think if you're very Artifact Mattersy, then you could go higher than that. But
Okay.
not a ton higher. Maybe like a C+ or a B-.
I'm gonna give it a C+. I just like the upside. I can't lie. I just kind of like the card too.
It's cool.
Yeah.
And it feels fun. Like it
Yeah.
feels. I'm glad that they made this card playable, because like it's not never like, oh, their Kaboomus went off with all the coin flips and it made the game unwinnable. No, it just kind of did some stuff, but it's fun.
Yeah.
You get a lot for your 2 mana on that little guy.
I like it. Goblin Rabble Masters next. It's 2 and a red for a 2/2. And it's a Goblin Warrior at rare. It says other Goblin creatures you control attack each turn. If able, at the beginning of combat on your turn, you get a 1/1 red Goblin creature token with haste. And whenever it attacks this guy, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn for each other attacking goblin. So it just spits out hasty must-attack goblins every turn.
Right. So you can actually get the Goblin the very first turn you play if you play it before combat, if that 1/1 attacking creature is relevant. So this card's kind of weird. So if your opponent has like a Runeclaw Bear, then it's not that great, because
Right.
it just kind of makes a Goblin and then trades for Runeclaw Bear.
I mean, it gets eaten.
Well, I'm saying the goblins you're making just get eaten by Runeclaw Bear, but if you ever want to attack with your Rabble Master, then you just trade.
Sure.
Yeah, so the Rabble Master, like in that situation, is like pretty much negated by 1 Runeclaw Bear, which is kind of sad. However, the situation where they don't have a blocker, they just get blown out.
Yeah, they get ran over.
Yeah. So the first turn you play it, that you get that 1 goblin and you attack for 1. The next turn you get another goblin. You attack with both of those goblins and the Rabble Master. That becomes a 4/2. You deal 6.
Whoa.
So if they don't have a blocker, you attack for 6 the very next turn.
And you've already attacked for 1 with the first goblin. So
Yeah.
now you're 7 damage in.
Yeah, and then the next turn you attack for 8. So this card with backed up with removal is a powerhouse.
Yeah, that's a lot of value for only 3 mana.
Yeah. So the worst case scenario is like you trade for Runeclaw Bear. Like you have a card that can't even get through Runeclaw Bear. That's sad. But the upside is huge. So, what do you give it? It's not a bomb. It's probably better than a C. So I gave it like a B. Like if you can clear the path for this thing, it will close out the game in a hurry.
I give it a B minus, but I maybe could be convinced to go up to B because, like, even in the sense that, like, okay, so the bear just eats the token every turn, like, you're still holding off a bear, like they're not using it.
Right. So, or if you did manage to just get in there that one time, and then they played the bear, you're gonna have at that point you're gonna have 3 goblins, and even if they trade for the Rabble Master, you got to keep those 3 other goblins.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh man, and with the Paragon,
yeah.
They're red goblins, right?
Yeah.
Oh baby.
Yeah, or so like this is a really good card backed up with combat tricks. Just the 1 mana, give a guy +1/+1 first strike, a Titanic Growth, whatever you can do to keep this thing alive and swinging is going to be great. So
it gets out of control pretty quickly.
Yeah, on a stalled board, it basically is just as bad as any other 3-drop would be, though. So,
yeah, I'll give it a B.
Yeah.
Oh, and remember though, other goblin creatures you control attack each turn if able.
Yeah.
That's not just the tokens.
Right.
It's
so
like
you
your
have
Kaboomist has to attack.
your Goblin Rough Rider.
Yeah.
Your Rummaging Goblin. I guess you're gonna have to activate that guy before combat or something like that.
Right.
So yeah, that is a relevant downside. Absolutely, it is.
Yeah, something to keep in mind. I think that the tendency is to focus on the tokens. Hoarding Dragon is next. It's 3 red for a 4/4 flying. Ta-da! It's a keeper, right?
Yes, it is.
It's also rare. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an artifact card, exile it, then shuffle. When it dies, you may put the exiled card into its owner's hand.
Yeah,
sure.
If I had, maybe 3 or 4 Crucibles of Fire, I guess I'd play a Hoarding Dragon.
What?
Oh wait, no, that's not what I meant at all.
That's not how that works.
Yes, you always play Hoarding Dragon if you're playing red. Air Elemental, like B+ minimum already right there. If you just have an artifact or 2 to get that's relevant, maybe just even at common, just that silly little golem, that 4/4 golem, that's fine.
Yeah.
Now, I had this card at the pre-release. I had 2 Hoarding Dragons actually at the pre-release. And my artifacts, I had 2 Souls of New Phyrexia. The artifact soul.
What is wrong with you?
I don't know.
2 and 2?
It was like the most Unreal Seal deck I've ever seen. I very easily went 4-0.
Wow.
Yeah, so the thing is that they're actually, like I said, with like I mentioned earlier with a different creature, I forget which it was. There's a lot of way for this to die that won't get you the thing. So like it gets exiled, it gets bounced. Now your artifact is gone forever, unfortunately.
Right.
But still, yeah, still upside. Sometimes I guess it wouldn't be that bad to have like a Bronze Sable or just some random artifact in your deck that you can search up guilt free. Kind of just like, okay, if I'm worried about that too much, about losing my bomb, then
man, I'm just taking my bomb every time. It's not like it doesn't really change that much. Like in most red decks, it's not like you're going to be churning through your deck looking for that one win condition anyway. And most of the time when your dragon dies, it's going to actually go to the graveyard.
It could be a good strategy to have a second Soul of New Phyrexia in your deck.
I like that.
Just as backup.
Oh man, they're like they see you exile it, then they exile your dragon like, phew, and then you're just like untapped Soul of New Phyrexia go, and they're just like, no.
Did that more than once. You get the pump fake Soul of New Phyrexia.
That is so brutal.
So anyways, it's an Air Elemental with a little bit of upside. Little bit. So B+.
Do you have to show the artifact?
Yes. It's exiled face up, I think.
Okay, that's how that works?
Yeah, I mean, how else are they going to know that it was?
Well, that's what I'm saying. It doesn't say reveal it, so it must just be implied by exiling. You gave it a B+?
Yes.
On board. Same thing. It's like the Sphinx. It's an Air Elemental with upside.
Okay.
What does Kirkish do?
This is Kirkish Onaki Ancient. I don't know, it's an Ogre Spirit for 2 red. It's a 4/3. So we're already looking at Borderland Minotaur. My guy.
Your guy.
And it has, whenever you activate an ability of an artifact, if it isn't a mana ability, You may pay a single red mana. If you do, copy that ability. You may choose new targets for the copy.
All right, so marginal upside, but who really cares? It's a 4/3 for 4. Like,
Yeah, I looked through just to see if there was anything interesting at all. There's the artifact that has like 4 mana tap a creature. I don't think that's a great reason to play that tapping thing because I don't think that card's very good. Probably the most relevant thing is the card Sacred Armory, which is the artifact that's 2 mana. All your creatures get +1/+0. Now you can make it 2 mana and a red, and all your creatures get +2/+0 instead of 1/+0. So that's kind of cool. But I mean, mostly I'm putting it in my deck because it's Borderland Minotaur, which I like. You know,
I like it. I think it's totally fine. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
not exciting. That ability is pretty not going to come up too often and probably going to be tough to abuse, but
Yeah,
whatever.
and
Never cutting it.
yeah, red doesn't get that many beefers, so I give it like a C+.
Yeah, I like C+ on Kirkesh as well. By the way, did you hear? I saw on Twitter somebody called that thing that tapper. They called it Pricey Manipulator.
That's a good name for it.
Siege Dragon. I've seen about enough of these for one lifetime. Pretty annoying. It's 5 red for a 5/5 flying. When it enters the battlefield, destroy all walls your opponents control. Whenever it attacks, if a defending player controls no walls. So you have to have played one after they played their Siege Dragon. It deals 2 damage to each creature without flying that player controls.
It's a big dumb dragon.
It's just a big dumb dragon. Like, destroying the walls isn't relevant. The second ability is, though, the attacking, and it'll wipe out anything small on the ground with no mana paid or anything like that. It just sort of cleans up the ground force for any type of swarm strategy. I had my opponent at the pre-release play this off of the generator.
Ooh, that's a really good use of the generator.
And just destroy me because it just wiped my board immediately, and it came down 2 turns earlier than I was expecting, and it had haste, and it's just like, wow, right? So, yeah, Siege Dragon definitely, though, in my mind, in the big dumb dragon camp here.
Yep.
Where does big dumb dragon fall for you? I mean, is this a sufficient finisher? Is this a good place to put 7 mana? I think in sealed it is. Is it in draft?
Remains to be seen. I'm gonna start off at a B, and that's assuming that 7 drops are playable in the format.
Yeah, I'm gonna start at B- just because I feel like 6s is normally where I want to top out at. It's got to be real special to be a 7, and Siege Dragon is definitely approaching real special. I mean, that is a very powerful card. But yeah, you gotta really want it, Siege Dragon. So we'll see how you do when the draft comes around.
There are actually more than a handful of playable walls in the set, which is kind of interesting.
That is funny. It actually kills some walls.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a situation where you would sandbag a useless wall against a red player just in case they have Siege Dragon? So
I don't know, but I got my Siege Dragon shut down by a wall.
You did. So
I did.
I mean, by shut down, you mean you still killed them in 2 turns by flying over.
Correct. But they got to keep that one Runeclaw bear alive when I was like, dang it, I wanted to torch that thing.
Oh, man. You got worked, Brian Wong. Sign the match slip, please. Soul of Chandalar. They went real old school here for the red soul. This one has first strike. So 4 red for a 6/6 first strike, mythic avatar. And again, we're back on the activated ability costing 5 mana here. 3 red, gulp. Soul of Chandalar deals 3 damage to target player, which is a lot. Mm-hmm. And it deals 3 damage to up to 1 target creature that player controls. And of course, it has that same ability from the yard.
Ouch.
Wow.
Ouch.
Unbeatable. I mean, not unbeatable, but very difficult to beat.
Yeah, very difficult to beat. I think it's neck and neck with the white soul for the best souls.
Yeah, 5 mana affects the board in a huge way.
Yeah, and that 6/6 first strike, that, very difficult to tussle with. And if they do try to stack block, just get one of those things out of here. Get it out of here.
Yeah.
Take 3 to boot.
It's basically chump block or take 6.
Yeah, and even if you play your soul and it gets insta-killed, you still got a nice little burn spell sitting there in your graveyard.
A really good one, too.
Yeah.
6 damage. I mean, that's a lot.
This thing, your opponent stabilizes the game at 3 life. They're going to have a really hard time staying alive if you cast this.
Yeah. I did lose with this on the battlefield once, but it was to a kind of extraordinary circumstance. But otherwise, every time I opened one of these, every time I resolved it, I won. Card was just amazing.
Seems very good. I gave it an A.
I give it an A as well. Green, Court of Calling.
Mm-hmm.
What is that thing in the middle? It's like this weird... Anyway, GGGX, Convoke. Instant, rare. Search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost X or less and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library.
So people are gonna overrate this card in limited because it's good and constructed.
That happens all the time.
Yeah, I call it the ornithopter disease. I don't know. I think Court of Calling is probably it's playable-ish. It makes your creature cost 3 more. That's a lot. You could just put another creature in your deck, and if you say if that creature cost three mana less, how good would it be? The answer is pretty good.
Right.
So if you have something cool to get that's not super expensive, you can kind of convoke it up and you can make it happen. I'm not just putting this card in my deck like willy-nilly. It's not just like an automatic play. I think like the most relevant thing you could do is get a Hornet Nest. If you have a Hornet Nest, I think Court of Calling is sweet because you get the instant Hornet Nest. They don't know what they're walking into. Boom.
Yeah, I mean that's what you get from Court of Calling, right?
Yeah.
You're paying 3 extra mana, but it allows you to get any creature that you can, get justify the cost for, and it's giving it flash.
Right. It's even if you're fairly convokey, it's going to be hard to get something very expensive out of it. So if you did have a bomby type thing that wasn't too expensive, I'm not sure what that would be. You could put a Court of Calling in your deck to go get it.
Would you first pick a Court of Calling?
I mean, only if I want it for the money. Absolutely not on play value.
No,
absolutely
I just meant on
not.
play value.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Okay. Give me a grade for Court of Calling. I'm really curious to hear where you come down on this.
I'm definitely not playing Court of Calling in every deck, but like if you're just gonna say in a deck that would want it, it's like a C at best. So I would give it like a C minus. I don't think it's
so it's like D plus C minus range.
Yeah, I think it's on the borderline of would I want to play, yes or no.
Wow.
I think it's on the cusp of 23rd card. That's how I'll say that.
Okay, I'm a little higher on it, but not a lot. Everything you said is valid. I give it a C plus. I like the ability to search up different answers or different things, and I feel like since we are unlimited, you're going to be able to get the mana. Like the three mana is going to come from the creatures, and then that you have on the battlefield, and then the rest are just going to be your land. So it'll often be roughly equivalent to how many lands you have on the battlefield.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's fine. I can get a 4 or 5 at some point during the course of a longer game, and that'll being able to flash something in on end step or during combat is pretty powerful.
Yeah, if you have a kind of a toolbox going, which is okay, I got a Reclamation Sage, I got the Spider, I got maybe one other thing that would be relevant to get here or there. And, if the game does go long, I might be able to get a 5 or 6 drop. Okay, I think that's a situation where you would play it.
Mm-hmm.
But
that's what you're looking for.
Yeah. Even there, I don't think it's significantly better than, say, Charging Rhino, like a 5-mana 4/4. I don't think it's significantly better.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I think only the Hornet's Nest makes it very exciting because the instant speed Hornet Nest could be a giant blowout.
Dude, Hornet's Nest is just very exciting. We're only 2 short cards away, but we've got a really cool card in between. Genesis Hydra. This card is neat. It is GGX for a 0/0. It enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. That part's not very exciting, right? We're talking about a 3/3 for 5.
Mm-hmm.
Or a 4/4 for 6 on the ground with no evasion, nothing. That's not very good. But the other part's really cool. It's a plant Hydra. That's it. No, there is another part. When you cast it, you reveal the top X cards of your library. So like, let's say you cast it for 5 mana. So it's 3X. The X equals 3. So you reveal the top 3 cards of your library. You may put a non-land permanent card with converted mana cost X or less, so any 3-drop or less, onto the battlefield, and then you shuffle. Now, the problem, of course, with this is that it's very, very mana hungry, right? Like
yes,
this thing wants tons of mana dumped into it. I love this card. I think it's super cool, but I am a little down on it based on how much mana you need to make this effectively great.
Yeah, I mean, what's your target here? Where are you excited to cast Genesis Hydra?
I think 5 is exciting because it gives you a big enough swath to find a 5. And yeah, no, I mean, look, I'm on board. That's 7 mana. It's not enough.
So if you cast it for 5, 3 GG, you have to hit something. You you reveal 3 cards and you got to hit a thing that costs 3 or less.
No, I
Like,
meant the X is 5.
oh, so you got to spend a 7 drop?
Yeah, you asked where it gets
Yeah,
exciting. I didn't say where I could cast it. That's what I'm saying. Is
sure.
like
As a 7 drop?
I see what you've done here, right? Like, is that
Yeah.
it's just too hard to make it work great. It's really cool, and you maybe can get something sweet, but it's so mana hungry that it really does kind of cripple itself.
Yeah, so I mean it's pretty unacceptable at x equals 1 or 2.
It is
Pretty unacceptable.
unacceptable.
You
Yes.
know. The only thing I like about it is that it scales with the game.
Yeah.
So it's like you always just cast it for all of your mana. So it's like, okay, if a card always costs 4 and you draw it with 10 lands out, well, it's still you get the same thing. But if you draw a Genesis Hydra with 10 lands out, all of a sudden it's better than it would be. Even if you said, the case where I'm willing to cast it is 6 mana or whatever, right? So it keeps getting better and better. I don't know. I don't think this card is very good. Like,
Yeah, I like I said, I think it's really cool. I think it's really fun. I think they're going to be good stories, but it just requires too much mana to be like considered a really great card.
yeah,
I'd probably give it a D.
yeah, it's like I don't know. I'm gonna start off with it in my deck. I'll give it a C minus, but it might start to fall on the wrong side of 23rd
Yeah,
card. We'll see.
I guess realistically speaking, like I think I'm giving it a D out of the sense that like there's going to be green decks that I don't play it in. But that's probably not true. Like I'll probably just jam it in whatever deck and see what I can do. So it's probably I'm gonna change it to a C minus as well.
I'm gonna give it the benefit of the doubt to start off the format, but we'll see. If it keeps underperforming, then
It's got a long road to hoe here. It is not great.
yeah, I would be shocked if this card got into B range. Shocked.
For sure. Hornet Nest is next. One of the coolest cards in the set. 2 and a green for an 0/2 Defender Insect at rare. All I wanted to do was open one of these in the pre-release. I chose green just to get one. I got one, and then I played blue-black. Whenever Hornet Nest is dealt damage, put that many 1/1 green insect creature tokens with flying and death touch onto the battlefield.
Marshall, the magic gods do not take kindly when they answer your prayers and then you rebuff them.
It was in this first pack, too. Like, they were immediately, and then I was like, nope.
Yeah, so Hornet's Nest is at the job that it does, which is block things on the ground. It is just about the best thing you could have.
It is.
Now
it is unbelievable at that specific job.
Yeah, it just does not do any other job. So, you just have to ask yourself, do I want a thing that blocks things on the ground? If the answer is yes, then you definitely want Hornet's Nest.
Yeah.
But the ceiling is limited because there are matches of Magic where you do not want that. You do not want a thing that all it does is block things on the ground. Your opponent's playing a control deck that has a very strong, powerful late game plan. I don't want a thing that only blocks on the ground. Or your opponent's playing a deck that has lots of flyers. You probably don't want Hornet's Nest. But your opponent's attacking you with Hill Giants or Juggernauts or whatever it is, Hornet's Nest is just about the best card in your deck.
It's the nuts, yeah.
Yeah. So it has a really high variance. You can take advantage of Hornet's Nest in some bad matchups if you have, say, the fight card in your deck.
Yeah. I saw somebody do that.
Yeah, that's pretty good. If you manage to get 4 or 5 Hornets there, that's going to win you the game almost every time. So that's a good reason to put in your deck. Just on the off chance you just have like a lightning strike or something, you could use it.
Think bigger. Heat Ray.
Heat Ray, sure, absolutely. Let's get a lot.
Instant speed. Make 5 1/1 flying insect. Like that's in combat unbeatable and in the air unbeatable. That's just a sweet combo. I mean, never have I been excited to 0 for 2 myself more than Heat Rain my own Hornet Nest.
Yeah. So I'm the only limiting thing I'm putting on Hornet's Nest, which is there's some matchups where it's not very good.
Agreed.
Or where I would even sideboard it out. And I had this at the previous. I did sideboard it out a couple times just because
the gods noticed that too, man.
No, but when
you
my
sideboarded it out.
When my opponent played Juggernaut and then I drew my forest for Hornet's Nest, I was very happy.
They looked kindly upon you. Oh, that's sick.
Yeah, usually Hornet's Nest is more of a deterrent than a thing that actually happens. But if it does happen, it's very good. I gave it a B, and I think the only limitation is, sometimes you don't want a thing that only blocks on the ground.
Yes, I give it a B as well. Also, coolness factor off the charts. This next card is, I think it's. So, I've talked a lot about true bombs, and I think that Hornet Queen, which is their next card, is one of the truest of bombs that we've had for a while. It's 4 GGG for a 2/2 flying with Death Touch. Now, obviously, when you hear that, your eyebrows raise up like, Marshall, what are you talking about, dude? But when it enters the battlefield, you get 4 1/1 green insect creature tokens with flying and death touch that accompany it.
Right. So basically, whatever the highest score a 7-drop can get in the format, this gets it.
Agreed.
I
This
don't
is
know.
the bombiest of bombs, but it costs 7.
Yeah. So whatever that reservoir is for 7-drops, I fill it all the way with Hornet Queen. So, you know, I don't know. I'm going to start off at a B plus because I just don't know how good 7-drops are. But if you resolve Hornet Queen, you are very likely to win the game of Magic.
Yeah, I'm going to give it an A. And the reason
Okay.
is just because it fulfills all my requirements for a bomb. I'm going to assume that in green, you are going to be able to find a way to cast it.
Yeah, green has extra mana for
Yeah,
sure.
that's the thing, is that green does get extra mana, and the 7 is a little misleading. It probably plays a little bit more like a 6 or a 5.7 or a 6.1 or something like that mana in green on average. So, again, the way that you get up, and if it was 6 mana and maybe 1 less insect, I would give it an A plus. Like this is the type of card that I want to play at the top of my range because of the fact that I always talk about this. You need to stabilize your board. One of the best ways to do it is to play a big creature on the ground that can block really well, especially if it brings friends. A card like Grave Titan comes to mind. But the absolute best is when you cannot, like the problem with Grave Titan, if there is one, is that sometimes they have a few Windrakes and a 3/2 flyer and they just kill you in the air the next turn. And they're like, sure, nice Grave Titan. That's a narrow case. It doesn't happen that often, but that is the knock if you were going to come up with one against Grave Titan. And Hornet Queen, it's just impossible to lose after resolving a Hornet Queen in any remotely reasonable scenario.
Yeah, they have to have like some kind of mass removal because
Yes.
you can't punch through it. And those things have flying. They're just sweet evasive creatures. I don't know. Yeah, it's a fantastic Magic card.
Love that card.
Yeah, it's like Abhorrent Overlord was in Triple Theros or whatever.
Exactly. Except for it's green and the creatures are better and it doesn't eat its own creatures, even though that would be kind of cool. Colonian Twin Grove is 5 and a G for a star Treefolk Warrior at Rare. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of forests you control. Interesting. When it enters the battlefield, put a green Treefolk Warrior creature token onto the battlefield with this creature's power and toughness are each equal to the number of forests you control. So you get 2 of them.
Yeah, you get 2 of them. I love how this card has the troll mana cost of 5 and a green, as if I'm ever casting this with only 1 forest in play.
Oh yeah, that is funny. It may as well cost like 3
Yeah,
GGGG or something.
Yeah, the mana cost is virtually irrelevant on
That
this.
is hilarious.
How
good is this guy? Like, let's say that you've
know.
got 10 forests in your deck, and when you cast it, you've got 3 of them or maybe 4 of them on the battlefield.
In that case, it's probably like a 3.8, and you get 2 of them.
Yeah.
I would play that.
Yeah, that seems really good. I mean, anytime you get 2 creatures for 1 card is really nice. What if they were 2 3/3s? Like, are you happy with that? 6 mana for 2 3/3s? That seems good, right?
I'm not like super stoked, but I would definitely put that in my deck.
Okay. And especially if they were 3/3s with the ability to maybe become 4/4s next turn or something.
Right, because their power and toughness isn't locked in when you cast it.
Right.
They grow as you play more forests.
I like this card. This card just seems great to me. I mean, and I'm attempting to give you a slightly less than average case scenario. There are going to be times where they're both 5/5s, right? Where you're just like, boom, right? Here's the big boys. And, on turn 6, or even if you power it out on turn 5 and you make like 2 4/4s, let's say, which is a reasonable upper, case scenario, that's great, man. That's huge.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting. So this card functions very strangely with bounce. So a bounce spell will just kill your token buddy. That's kind of unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
But your own bounce spells, you cast it on the main one and you can replay it and get more tokens.
Oh yeah, peel from reality, get rid of your thing, and then wow, yeah, that's
pretty cool.
That's a nice long game.
With the Primadox, you can just do this every turn. Boom, 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 boom. I don't know.
Just start pumping out Twin Groves.
I mean, that's the world where your opponent's just basically a punching bag and not really interacting with you. But I can dream, right?
That's the world you live in, Brian Wong. I've seen your rating on Magic Online.
Yeah, everything works out all the time.
The world is Brian Wong's punching bag.
So I gave Colonian Twin Grove a B-. I think it's a pretty cool card. I think it's pretty good. If you're playing mono green, you're somehow doing so relevant or reasonably without anything crazy bad in your deck, then it's probably insane. But that's really not going to happen very often. So you play a deck, it has 10, 11 forests in it. It's pretty good.
All right, I'm going to give it a solid B.
Okay.
with a nod towards B plus, but I'm going to just stick with B. I'm thinking of the Centaur sorcery. They gave you 2/3/3s in Return to Ravnica.
Yeah.
It was okay, right?
Yeah, it
Like
was okay.
it wasn't exciting. This has a lot of upside on that, I think. I don't think it's going to be too often that you get 2 bears out of your Twin Grove. If so, you probably misbuilt your mana or just got really unlucky. I think the baseline is pretty reasonable at 3/3, occasionally 2/2, somewhat often 4/4s, and then it goes up from there.
Yeah, and don't like screw up your mana in a deck that's like 50-50 on spells by going like 13-4 or anything, you know what I'm saying?
To
Like
Twin Grove out. Yeah.
yeah, like be careful here. You can maybe shade it a little, but you want to cast your spells. That's important.
Agree. All right, Life's Legacy is next. It's 1 and a green for a sorcery. It's a rare. As an additional cost to cast Life's Legacy, you got to sack a creature. Okay. It's sorcery speed. Okay. You draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power.
Yeah, so being a sorcery is very important because you can't just use it to cash in a creature that was going to die in combat, a creature that was under, just going to get killed by a removal spell, that kind of thing. That's very, very important on a card like this. Makes it significantly worse. So I'm trying to figure out how we're going to abuse this Life's Legacy. Like, how are we going to get upside? Just
I mean,
sacrifice.
one way that comes to mind is just if it's been encrusted.
Yeah, I think in Crust. So I think at minimum, Life's Legacy is a pretty cool sideboard card against Encrust. So that's where I'm starting off with the card. So let's see. Would there be reasons why we'd be interested in main decking this Life's Legacy? And I was trying to come up with those. I think if you had a couple of Titanic Growths in your deck, that's kind of a fun one because you can Titanic Growth to win combat or deal damage to your opponent, and then post-combat Life's Legacy to draw a whole bunch of cards.
Mm-hmm.
I think that could be a good reason. I think just in a normal average deck, I probably wouldn't play it.
Like, is there an argument to be made for I play a Grizzly Bears or whatever it's called now,
Sure.
Runeclaw Bear, and I attack and block with it and it does some things, and then I curve up to 5 or whatever, and now I'm starting to run out of gas, and my Runeclaw Bear has really kind of outstayed its welcome, right? It's not really doing combat anymore in a reasonable way, and just cashing in a Life's Legacy to draw 2, like, is that a thing?
I think that's not unreasonable.
But it's not great either, right? Like, you had to pay 2 cards to draw 2.
Right. It's not great. And just think about the game where tempo is important, where you're playing a back and forth game. It's an arms race, who can build up their board faster, who can attack and block more. Man, Life's Legacy is just stuck in your hand there. You really don't want to play it.
I don't like this card.
Yeah, I don't really like it that much either. I could get it into my main deck under certain circumstances, but I'm going to start off playing the format where I think this is probably not a card you should be main decking. So I gave it a D+, but I do think if you had enough things going in the right way, you could bring it in out of the board or maybe just barely main deck it.
Okay, I like D+ for Life's Legacy also. There's clearly some upside there, but it's just so conditional, so much setup cost. Not a big fan. If it was an instant and cost more, I'd be much more interested.
Yeah.
I remember there was that one from Rise of the Eldrazi or whatever, and that was pretty good. But this
one's
not.
Yeah, being an instant is huge. Also, that was the format where it was very easy and reasonable to cast 7 power creatures all the time.
Yeah.
And just being able to draw an entire hand is great. If you're just doing this with a 3/3 or whatever, that's not great.
It's not great, no.
and a lot of times, if I have a big creature in play, I just want to be beating down with it. Like, why am I cashing this in for drawing more crap? I don't know.
A, B, B, D. Always be beating down. Nissa Worldwaker. What does Nissa Worldwaker do?
All right, this is a brand new green planeswalker for 3 green. And she starts off with 3 loyalty, so a little frail. And
5 mana for 3 loyalty. Okay.
So she has 2 +1 abilities. The first +1 ability.
Just by saying that, you've got my interest. There hasn't been that many that have had that, and they've all been good.
Yeah, you start thinking Elspeth, right?
Yeah. Actually, did the old Nissa have that? Anyway, go ahead.
So the first one is +1. Target land you control becomes a 4/4 elemental creature with trample. It's still a land. So that's permanent. And that's not until end of turn. So that's not Koth. This is a different thing entirely. Even if Nissa dies, you still get to keep that 4/4. That's pretty cool.
That's cool. 4/4 is big.
Yeah. So unfortunately, if you play Nissa on turn 5, all your lands are going to be tapped probably. So that 4/4 is going to be tapped as well. That's kind of unfortunate. If you do Nissa, on a land to attack with, don't use her on the land you just played because that land still has summoning sickness. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, especially on Magic Online. In real life, you can just sort of explain what you were trying to do, but on Magic Online, it's very unforgiving.
Right. Her other +1 ability is untap up to 4 target forests. So I don't know,
I mean,
like
you did say
maybe
4, right? Like,
yeah.
jeez.
Right. So potentially the turn that you play her, you could untap some lands and play another thing to help block. That could be relevant.
You could play another very big thing.
Yeah.
You
Or
paid you've played 9 mana worth of stuff that turn, and you've got a creature and a planeswalker on 4 loyalty.
yeah, well she does only untap forests. So
Ah,
yeah, unless you're mono green, it's going to be hard to get all 4 out of that.
fair.
Um or the next turn you can use her to help cast 6, 7, 8 drops, something like that maybe.
Yeah, here's our what's it called? Our Hydra enabler. It's a mythic.
Sure. Yeah. And her ultimate is -7, so that's actually a long ways away. Search your library for any number of basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Those lands become 4/4 elemental creatures with trample. They're still lands. So that's a win the game ultimate right there.
Yeah, you do have to wait a turn though, right? They have summoning sickness.
Yeah, because it's the only the lands you just got become
Mm-hmm.
4/4s. So yeah, that does
But then you get
take
to
a turn.
untap and just kill.
Right. So yeah, that is a very threatening ultimate. She starts off with only 3, has 2/1, so it'll take her a while to get there. I mean, mostly what you're probably going to do is play her, make a 4/4 trample, untap, make another 4/4 trample, and hope that's good enough because it usually is.
Yes, it usually is. And they can go ahead and attack Nissa all you want, especially the second one that you get to make, because that one can block if you want, or it can attack if it's better for you.
Right.
Yeah, just flood
Yeah.
the board with 4/4s.
Yeah, I mean, even her worst case scenario, which is she comes down, makes a thing of 4/4, and then dies right away. That's actually pretty reasonable because you would expect to pay about 5 mana for a 4/4 anyways.
Exactly, for a 4/4 trample, right?
Yeah, so you did all right. So I mean, this card just has a really high ceiling. A really high floor. It's very hard for this card to be bad. Unlike maybe a Johnny, where you can imagine, okay, a Johnny comes down, doesn't do anything, and then dies.
Right.
Nissa is gonna do something.
Yeah, I like Nissa. This card seems really good.
Yeah, I agree.
Are we talking A-, B+? What do you like?
I'll give her an A-, but
I'll go A- as
it
well.
might even be an A. I don't know. I think this card
Yeah.
is pretty.
I mean, we're splitting hairs anyway. You're
Yeah.
Windmill Slam first picking this and being pretty happy about it.
I mean, you just like most of the time you're gonna play this, and next turn you attack with 2 4/4s.
Yes. And you have a Planeswalker. Nice game.
That's good.
Phytotitan is 4 GG for a 7/2 plant elemental. Like a boss. Look at that guy. He's a rare, and when he dies, you return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control at the beginning of his or her next upkeep.
All right, so this is a card for attrition wars. You're like, okay, given unlimited time, I will kill you with my Phytotitan.
Right. That's what
yeah.
it is, right? Because the thing is, it's actually fairly reasonable to use a removal spell on Phytotitan. It might not seem like that's the case because you're like, well, it's just going to come back anyway. And that is true, but it takes forever. Like you kill it on your turn, you can attack them, you shift the turn back, they flop this plant back onto the battlefield, but it's laying there.
Yeah.
Pass a turn back, you attack them again, and then it's not until that next turn that they actually get to use Phytotitan to attack or block again. So pretty fair here, right? Like this isn't the broken type of 6-drop. This is one that, like you said, if given infinite time, it will eventually get the job done.
All right, so I have a comparison here for you.
Okay.
Ancient Silverback. This is a card that is in the set.
All right.
Costs the exact same, 4 green.
Yes.
Is a 6/5. So as far as, bashing face, it's very equivalent. And Ancient Silverback has green mana regenerate. Which card is better?
I think the Silverback's like way better.
I think you might be right.
Yeah.
Because the Silverback doesn't come back tapped, right? The Silverback just bashes every turn.
Yes, and it also blocks like all the time. Like the Phytotitan blocks every other time after it starts coming back.
Yeah.
I don't really like it. I like the idea of it, and I think it has a place. Like if I'm in green, I'm gonna play it, I think.
Yeah, I mean the Phytotitan is a little bit better against, that black kill spell that doesn't let you regenerate.
There you go.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, flesh to dust.
Yeah. If you just need to block and trade the turn that you play it, maybe this could be a little better because it's like Well, the Silverback you didn't have regen mana up, and this comes back anyways too. So there is some upside to the Fire Titan. I don't know. It's
I'm not a big fan, but it's playable. Like I'm not, like I said,
absolutely.
I'll pick it in green and I'll play it. But for my 6 drop money, this isn't exactly what I want.
Yeah, I gave the Silverback a better grade than this. So I think I gave Silverback a B.
B or something. Yeah,
Yeah, I'll give the Titan like a C plus, but we'll see.
I'll give it a C. I think it's fine. Like the fact is, it still costs 6. Like this is your most expensive card. This is your big finisher, right? Like
Mhm.
think of other 6s that we've already talked about. Colonian Twin Grove. You get 2 3/3s or maybe 4/4s. I like that better than this. We're going to talk about Soul of Zendikar in a few minutes. I like that way better than this, right? And that soul is, well, that's actually amazing. But next card, Restock.
Okay.
It's why are we talking about Restock? That's an uncommon in this set, right?
Correct.
So
Gatherer is a little funky when it comes
all right,
to.
so not Restock. Next card, Soul of Zendikar. Hey, let's talk about it. 4 GG 6/6 Trample. Wah wah.
Oh.
It's got Reach. What do you think about Reach versus Trample? I think Trample would be like the default, but it's not. It's Reach.
In this case, I prefer Reach.
Oh, like you
Yeah,
like to stabilize better, or
yeah. I want to stabilize the game, and we'll see when we see his abilities. But I feel like the way you're losing if you have Soul Zendikar out is they're flying over the top, and not the fact that they could hold you back.
so you're looking for this thing to stabilize and go long,
Hmm.
and crush the card advantage game a little bit more than to like beat down for 6 or whatever.
Yeah, you don't really want to risk your Soul of Zendikar in combat where it might die. Yeah, So we'll see why here. Let's go through the ability.
All right, so 3 GG, so 5 mana. So on the cheaper side from what we've seen from the Souls, you get a 3/3 beast. And of course, you can do that from the graveyard as well once.
Yeah. So this is
That's insane.
this is a very proactive strategy that will win the game. It's like if you don't kill me, you will die because you cannot you cannot sit here and let me do this more than like once or twice before the game is out of control.
Right. And 3/3 beasts are not to be trifled with. They are very powerful.
Yeah.
I like this card a lot. I think this is one of the better Souls. I think it's great. It's first pickable. I think it's an A.
I give it an A minus. I don't know. I think it's very good though.
You know, it's funny because I gave it an A because of the reach. Because
I
remember, I'm always
yeah.
talking about like how does it stabilize you? You just talked about it, and one of the ways that you can die in a lot of these cases is by to flyers. And Soul of Zendikar basically blocks all the flyers.
Sure.
I like it.
Absolutely.
I think this card's really good. I love the inevitability too. I love just like, look, if the game doesn't change from here on out, I don't even have to draw cards anymore. I just make beasts and kill you.
Everything looks bad compared to the Titans, but you just think of like this could be Grave Titan. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah, where you don't have to pay all the mana. Those days are over, my friend. And
with
okay,
good reason.
from a limited perspective, I am just fine with that.
And a constructed one as well. But
Yeah, I kind of liked him in constructed.
yeah, Soul Zendikar is sweet. I don't know.
Yeah, I give it an A. You give it an A minus. Yisan the Wanderer Bard, karaoke enthusiast. He's 2 and a green for a 2/3 legendary human rogue. Thumbs up.
I would play that.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
I'm
playable.
not stoked, but I'll put it in my deck.
Sure, it's a C. But the ability is really cool. Kind of. 2 and a G, tap it, put a verse counter on Yisan the Wanderer Bard. Okay, so you've got a verse counter on him. Search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost equal to the number of verse counters on Yisan and put it onto the battlefield and then shuffle your library.
So with converted mana cost equal, so not equal or less than.
Equal, right. So,
Hmm.
so for limited, you're rarely running 1-drops. Now, they do pop in every once in a while, right? There's
Yeah,
like Elvish Mystic or whatever.
Elvish Mystic,
Sure.
Typhoid Rats.
Yeah, so they are there. But let's just say that that's not super relevant for Yisan because I think that for the most part, you're really looking to get it to 2 and up for limited. That's kind of the sweet spot. It's like once you start getting 2-drops for free, now you're kind of rolling along. Little bit expensive, right? 2 and a G to tap it. But if you do look at it in the case of like actually getting a creature, like especially if you have a 1-drop, that adds up. That's great, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you're tutoring them up and putting them into play for free, essentially. I mean, you got to pay 3, but I mean, you're not paying the mana cost on the creature. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, I would say most of the time, I'm not going to be putting the rest of my plans on hold to just start activating Yisan. I think this is something that you do in lieu of having other things to do.
Good.
But it's a very good thing to do in lieu of other things to do. And most, you know, 3 mana 2/3s do not have the ability to like go long like this card can.
No, this card is great.
Yeah, and I think it does gain a lot of upside if you do have a 1-drop in your deck, like a 1-drop that's worth playing.
I
So
agree.
Typhoid Rat or Mystic, where you can just get that free thing. If you have to wait, if you have to activate it twice to get your first benefit, that to me that's a lot worse. But
You have to have really nothing else to do to make that worth it.
exactly.
Cruel Sadist. Yeah. I mean, I think the thing is like, so you play this on turn 3, you play your land on turn 4, and your choice is activate this for either a 1-drop or nothing, or play a 4-drop. You're just going to play your 4-drop.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Still, I love this guy. This is one of my favorite types of cards. Not because like I don't care about the whole like birthing pod style effect. Like that doesn't get me going. But what I really like about cards like Yisan is that it's great it's a quadrant killer, right?
Yes.
It's just a crusher. It's like great developing. It's great when you're at parity. It's really good when you're ahead because it can help ensure that you stay that way or even just attack or whatever. And when you're behind, it's totally fine. Like it blocks nicely. It's as a 2/3. It's cheap. It's only 3 mana to cast. So like it's not like you're drawing a 6 or whatever. It just is this sweet spot of all of those things for only 3 mana. I love it.
Yeah, it's a card that fills a role that you need to fill anyways. You need to have, early drop creatures in your deck that attack and block, but it's one that is relevant on any turn of the game. You have this in play, it's always going to be relevant, and that's something that you can't say for most cards like that. So
yeah, love it. Ultimately though, it's hard to give it like an A or something because it's very mana intensive. It's not going to have like a big impact. It's more like just one of those mid-level ones, but I do give it at least a B. I would consider B plus for this. I think I'll just stay at B. I think Yisan's just like a super solid B.
Yeah, I give it a B as well.
Ooh, let's talk about some gold cards. There's only 2 of them, Brian, but one of them super sweet. The other one, I'm not sure yet. Let's talk about the super sweet one first. Garrick Apex Predator. What a badass. So it's 5G B. So it's 5 and a green and black. So it's 7 mana. 5 loyalty planeswalker.
All right, starts off pretty big.
Pretty darn big with 2+1 abilities. So we're talking about a 6 loyalty planeswalker on the battlefield after you ship the turn back. The first +1 is largely irrelevant for limited. It's destroy another target planeswalker. So let's just ignore that one because if you do that, then whatever, screenshot it and send it to us. Otherwise it doesn't exist. But this other +1 is really great. It's put a 3/3 black beast creature token with death touch onto the battlefield.
Yeah,
Whoa.
that's a card that protects itself. That's saying, all right, come at me, bro. Like
In a huge way. Like the death touch is unbelievable on that because no matter what their big bomb is, it needs to have first strike or something insane to get through the death touch thing. And of course, it's just going to be bigger than a lot of creatures on its own. There's a lot of 2-power things that are running around and all that.
yeah, and death touch is a nice ability to tack on anything because it just means you don't get worked. It's like, okay, they played a pump spell. All right, at best they trade.
Right. So that's excellent. Next is -3. So you can take Garrick and go for 7 mana, make a 2 loyalty planeswalker, but it has -3, destroy target creature. I'm already sold, but there's more. You gain life equal to its toughness.
Yeah, so one of the main weaknesses of planeswalkers is, there's that one stupid evasive creature that's kind of just plinking away at it, and it really limits what you can do with your planeswalker because it's like, my planeswalker is going to die in 2 turns, right?
Right.
This guy has the ability to reach up there and just chop that thing out of the air or whatever it is, which is awesome. Or just they have some utility creature that must die, or even you're on offense, just chop down that blocker. I don't know. This card makes it makes it so much more relevant in more games because worst case scenario, you can just come down and kill something. Even if Garrick's going to die, you can at least come down and kill something. That's great.
Yeah, kill their bomb or whatever.
Sure.
Card's so good. And then the ultimate, just to show that Garrick is not all take, he also gives. Target opponent gets an emblem with whenever a creature attacks you. Little note from Uncle Garrick here. It gets +5/+5 and gains trample until end of turn.
So, I mean, I assumed to get to the +8, you had to put a couple beasts into play. So when those beasts have trample and death touch, that's probably going to kill them.
That's probably going to kill them. Yeah, they're
Right.
probably dead. Love this card. Love it. I think that I love the versatility here, right? So we've talked a lot about 7-drops. Are they playable in the format? We don't know. But if we are going to put 7 mana into it, we want it to stabilize us, to win the game for us, etc. Garrick is very versatile. You play 7 mana, and if you are at parity or ahead, you start making beasts, and you just overrun the board with beasts, right? And if you're behind, you either start making beasts to dig yourself back out if that's going to solve your problem, or you just kill their bomb. You just boom, kill your bomb, and I've got Garrick on 2, which you now have to deal with as well.
And
if
you
they
gain
don't,
life.
then it's beast. And you gain life so that they can't do the thing where they're just like, sure, you killed my best creature, but I'm just going to ignore Garrick and kill you now.
Yeah. That's sweet. So, I mean, this card is like, Sip of Hemlock Plus or whatever, it's
Right.
like, no matter how you think of it, like you're going to get something pretty good out of this. All right. This costs 7. Hornet Queen costs 7. Which would you prefer? Assuming you're green black, you can cast it. Which card is more likely to win you the game when you cast it? I
like
guess
if we ran the numbers on it, like, did some Lee Sharp action on MTGO, I think my gut tells me that the Hornet Queen would probably win more. Garrick's more powerful. Like, Garrick has a higher top end. You can make 10 beasts on this over the course of a game or something. But I tend to think that immediate impact trumps long-term grindability or whatever. So I think it might be Hornet Queen, but my gut tells me that it would be really close.
Yeah, I think your main weakness here with Garrick is triplicate spirits.
Yeah, there you go.
If your opponent plays a triplicate spirit, it's like, oh, well, I can get a couple of beasts and then Garrick dies or something like that, right? Because using the destroy target creature on those tokens is not very strong.
No, especially because then they can just attack with the remaining 2 tokens and kill Garrick. So you have traded Garrick for 1 token and 2 life.
I also find it quite funny that like the apex predator is like weakest against like insects, like just like a swarm of like ants or hornets.
That's
or
a
like
great story, though,
little
right?
spirits or birds or whatever. It's those little things. Anything singular and large, he can chop it up and wear it as a pelt. But
it's funny. It's like War of the Worlds, right? Like they can kill all the people, and they have these death machines that knock down like cities, but then if they breathe air, they die. It's like, or like bacteria or whatever.
All right. So I gave her the same score I gave Hornet Queen, which is a B plus. Like I just have that's my ceiling right now without knowing the speed of the format on 7 drops.
All right. Well, I'm giving Garrick an A. I think that 7 drops, generally speaking, are sketchy, but the ones that stabilize the board and win you the game for getting there, you can. I mean, even in Gate Crash, you could play a 7 if it was good enough to stabilize the board against an aggressive deck. The problem is there just weren't any that did that. The Primordials were too clunky for what you needed them to do. And I think Garrick's in that realm. I know that Hornet Queen is, and I just hope that we can cast these because these cards are so sweet. Man, Garrick is great.
Yeah, worth splashing for too.
For sure. Easy. Sliver Hive Lord. It costs Wooburg. White, blue, black, red, green, all of them for a 5/5 legendary Sliver at Mythic. Sliver creatures you control have indestructible. So basically it's a 5/5 indestructible.
Yeah, we don't have too many other slivers.
There's 5 uncommon slivers?
There's 5 at uncommon, and there's the sliver land.
Yeah, this is just not a thing.
Yeah, it's not a big enough reward for making a huge, crazy amount of mana.
No.
Chromanticore was a card that wins you the game when you cast it.
Right.
Sliver Hive Lord is not.
No.
Your opponent can just ignore it or just chump block it with a couple of like soldier tokens for a couple turns. Like it just doesn't have enough impact.
Right.
So,
and we're glazing over the fact that when you cast it, almost never happens, and you have to completely warp your deck just to make it work.
Yeah. So I'm having a hard time imagining the deck.
Out. Yeah, I give it an F. I'm never playing this thing.
I'll give it like a D minus because like
what, the Sliver Hive Lord challenge or something?
Yeah, I mean like I'm not like if for some reason I had a deck that had all the lands of different colors or something like that, all right, I'll put this in. But this in itself is not a reason to do that. So I'm really having a hard time imagining why this is happening ever. But I don't know. If for whatever reason my mana base was like 3/3/3/3/3 or whatever, I guess I'm putting it in.
It's like the opposite of Magical Christmas Land. It's just like hell.
Oh yeah. I'm living on Grixis or whatever. It's a nightmare, a living nightmare.
All right. Well, back in the real world, it's an F. Avarice Amulet is 4 colorless mana for an equipment. So I always like to skip down to the what does it cost to equip before we look at the rest. It's sort of the vanilla test of equipment, if you will. It costs 2 to equip, which is reasonable. So 4 to cast, 2 to equip. Let's see what we get. The creature gets +2/+0 and has vigilance. Interesting combination. And at the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card.
All right, so that's a plan. I see a plan there.
I like this plan. Interesting that it buffs its power, though, and not its toughness, because you'd think you'd want to suit this thing up and then sit back, right? And just be like, here's my Howling Mine, and I have a great blocker. But it's kind of like, let's start attacking and also drawing a bunch of cards, because it has a very, very major drawback. When equipped creature dies, and they will want to kill it, target opponent gains control of Avarice Amulet. They just get it. And it's colorless, remember? So it's not like they're going to be in a situation where it's like, oh, but they don't have red mana, so they can't activate it. No, they just get to throw it on something or just not or whatever. That's too steep, right? I mean, creatures die. Like, that's what happens. And +2/+0 doesn't help prevent that.
Yeah, it feels very risky to me. It's also expensive. I mean, so I would look at Avarice Amulet as a card that I need it to be good in the matchup. It's like either that would be one of the last cards to put in my deck, and I'm very willing to take it out, or a card that I would bring in if I think, okay, my opponent doesn't have kill spells, and they're also not that fast, and I would just want to get card advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe if I am playing a deck with lots of kill spells, I don't feel as bad about it, because even if they take it, I can just take it right back.
Okay. One thing that you can do, there's a lot of trickery here. You can put it on your worst creature.
Sure.
If you don't plan on attacking, especially, just be like, sure, like, you're going to have to kill my worst thing. And remember, you're going to draw cards. You can just take it back. Like, they equip, you're like, kill your guy, give me my Avarice Amulet back, and you can have a little fight over the thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's okay. Interestingly, there's certain color pairs that this is actually quite strong against. Like, if you're playing blue-white, like, how are they going to kill your creature, right? They don't get to, like, creatures don't get to die from blue-white spells. They get exiled or bounced. So, if they're not a particularly aggressive blue-white deck and you have a little bit extra time, you could use this as a personal Howling Mine, and they're just not really going to have a lot of ways to mess with this.
Right, exactly.
They can, like, encrust it or something, but it's just not great.
Yeah, I really think what's in your opponent's deck is very important for whether or not you want this card. So keep that in mind. Okay,
so what do we give it? I have to play with this card before I can give it a proper grade, but I'm going to take a guess at it here, and I'm going to go C+. I feel like it's actually a usable card that you can maneuver around more than it looks like.
All right, I'm going to start off with D+, which is I'm going to not play it in most decks unless I feel like it's perfect. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm gonna try it. I want to try it. The next is the Chain Veil. We'll kind of breeze through this one. It's 4 colorless for another. It's for a legendary artifact. It's a mythic. At the beginning of your end step, if you didn't activate a loyalty ability of a planeswalker this turn, lose 2 life. Well, that's a pretty big downside. And you can pay 4 and tap it for each planeswalker you control. I'm not even gonna read the rest. Like, this is not a limited card in any way.
Read the rest, Marshall.
Okay, fine. For each planeswalker you control, you may activate one of its loyalty abilities once this turn, as though none of its loyalty abilities had been activated this turn. Unless you double up on your planeswalker activations.
Yeah, so, okay.
Why are you talking about this?
I'm not putting it in my deck if I have one planeswalker, because I don't put a card in my deck that only functions with one thing. I'm not putting it in my deck with 2 planeswalkers, okay? Because I feel like that's still too unfortunate. So let's say I'm in the case where I have 3 to 6 planeswalkers, okay? Now, in a situation where I have 3 to 6 planeswalkers, here's what I want from my deck. I want creatures to help block to keep my planeswalkers alive. I want removal to keep evasive things, off of my planeswalkers. I want lands to cast planeswalkers. I want draw spells to help me find planeswalkers. I do not want the freaking Chain Veil, okay? Play any other card. Other card.
This is awesome. All right. So have we stumbled across our first F-?
Yeah, this is like F-. It's like you cannot even show me the deck that I could draft that would play this.
I love it. I love that you went deep enough to find the 3 to 6 planeswalker limited deck, and it still didn't make the cut.
No, it's not even close to making the cut there.
All right, Chain Veil F-. Grind Clock. Excuse me. 2 colorless mana for an artifact. Tap it. It's a rare. Tap it to put a charge counter on it. Tap it to mill target player for however many charge counters are on it.
This is a reprint from Scars of Mirrodin Block.
Yeah, it wasn't very good there. I tend to like colorless inevitability cards, right?
Yep.
Cards that will allow you to win the game if it goes indefinitely long, because then you have a win condition, it's cheap, and you can dedicate basically every other card in your deck into just not losing. This was what was in Scars. It got blown up a lot. I don't think it will as often here, so it
Right.
might fit the bill. It's just very slow.
Yeah. So I think I forget. You either go to I think it's 5, 6, and 7 are all equivalent or
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah. I think you stop at was it 4 or 3 or 5? I can't
No,
remember.
I know that I think there's three different numbers. Assuming you play grind clock on turn two, there's three different numbers that all give you the same turn to kill. But
Right.
I'm not good at math, so ask
Yeah, we'd
somebody
have to
else.
run that. The fact is, this card doesn't see a ton of play, right? I mean, the downside being that, like, if you're trying to do a control deck that needs a win condition like this can be your win condition. It really can, because it's very hard to destroy. It's like if you have a creature-based win condition, a lot of times your opponent can just use that removal on it and kind of leave you in an awkward spot. But this thing doesn't affect the board in any really meaningful way, and it takes forever to kill your opponent. So you really need to have a dedicated control deck. Like, this is where I like Keening Stone or whatever, the ones that just sort of slam the door. This
Mhm.
does that, but it takes ages to actually get the job done.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if I'm playing the stupid Mind Sculpt deck, which I don't think I will ever do because I'm not that type of player,
Right.
then I guess you could put Grind Clock in that deck. I actually, for me, Grind Clock is like a niche sideboard card, and I actually think it's good against control decks.
Because they're
Because
just not doing enough.
yeah, they can't kill you that fast. So if you play a turn two Grind Clock against a control deck, they probably can't kill it, and that will probably kill them before they kill you. So uh, that's kind of where I view it is like a niche sideboard card.
I agree.
So for that reason, I give it a D.
I give it a D as well. Haunted Plate Mail's next. What does that do?
This is an equipment for 4 mana, and it costs 4 to equip. And equipped creature gets +4/+4. So I mean, just there, like that's a long game plan. Like if the game does go long, this is going to be awesome. But expensive equipment, especially stuff that's expensive to equip, um, is so clunky because it's like, oh, they kill my guy, and now like I just
Peel
wasted.
from reality.
Yeah, I just spent 8 mana and I just got nothing, and that's devastating.
And you're going to have to spend 8 more or at least 4 more. So you could be
Yeah,
12 mana in before the thing gets on.
right.
Yeah, that's it. I play it.
Right. It also only makes one creature, right? So it's like, okay, if you're in a situation where you have one creature and they have 3 or 4 creatures, well, it doesn't really necessarily matter how big your thing is because they're just still attacking in on you anyways.
Right.
Now, Haunted Plate Mail has a second ability, which is 0 until end of turn. Haunted Plate Mail becomes a 4/4 spirit artifact creature, and you can only activate this ability if you control no creatures.
Right.
So this actually makes up for a huge downside of the card, which is normally it does nothing if you have no creatures, and here you actually get something pretty good.
Yeah, you get a 4/4 for 4, which is quite nice.
Yeah, and a lot of times the strategy against an equipment like this is just kill all of your things, and now all of a sudden, like the Haunted Plate Mail is pretty good against that.
Right. I like it. I play it. I
I
don't
like
love
it.
it. I don't take it super early or anything like that, but it usually does make the cut in my deck, even with that ridiculous 4 equip cost.
Yeah, it just is a card that wins the game if you go long, and I really I don't know if I can say this strongly enough, but that ability to become a creature when you have nothing else is so important because it just raises the floor on the card, which normally this kind of card would do nothing in a very high percentage of games, more than I would be comfortable with.
Right.
But being able to become that creature in a pinch is very important. Also, you can actually use this kind of aggressively and just trade off your creatures for theirs, like on purpose, and then have a 4/4 to smash them with.
Right.
Done that too.
Where do you grade it? Is it like a C plus?
I think it's cool. I give it like a B or a B minus.
B or B minus? Yeah. I can't decide between C plus and B minus. It is so, that 4 is just staring at me. Like, it's just laughing at me like, come on, dude, you're not really going to pay 4, are you? But man, it does really just clean up. It makes any creature a must deal with. And I like that. I like having that kind of ability. I'm going to give it a B minus. I think that what you mentioned is true, that it does shore up that no creature game enough with that ability.
Yeah, I kind of want it in the deck with that stupid 1/2 flying lifelinker.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. That's not beatable. So
Yeah, I got Baneslayer Angel. Okay.
Yeah.
This next one is Obelisk of Erd. It is an artifact for 6 colorless. It has Convoke, so you can tap creatures to help cast this. As it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type, and creatures of the chosen type get +2/+2.
Hmm. How do you? So a creature type can be either thing on the line, right? Like if it's a
Uh,
goblin warrior, you can
sure.
choose warrior or goblin.
Right?
So you want to often you're probably going to be choosing a secondary thing just in case it because like you can have white cards that are warriors and red cards that are warriors or whatever, but you can't or soldiers or something. But you're not really going to have any white goblins or
Yeah.
something like that. I don't know. I mean, you have to really look at your deck when you do it. I mean, +2/+2 is ridiculous.
That's a lot. I mean, if you get this on 2 things, then it's worth it.
Are
Um,
there any really strong tribal themes though in this format? Like it
I
feels like
mean,
we're all over the map.
I think the best way to use Obelisk of Erd is with token makers.
Okay, because you can choose whatever they are.
Yeah, like you just choose Spirit, for triplicate spirits, or you choose Soldier for Raise the Alarm or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Soldier would be pretty good in a deck with a couple Raise the Alarms, or yeah, I think Obelisk of Erd is definitely best in a white deck.
Okay. Is it good?
Um, in most decks, no.
Okay.
I,
It's just too narrow.
yeah, it's just like, especially in a set like this that's not built for a tribal set, you're just not going to have that many things that match up creature types. You're just not. So you're really going to be like, okay, it will hit one thing, obviously, but the chances of it hitting multiple things, and even then, it's not like a huge blowout if it hits 2 things necessarily.
I
So you
don't know.
really,
That's pretty blowouty. Like,
yeah, but like those things can die, and you might not have any
yes.
more in your deck or whatever,
Yes, that's true.
And 6 mana is a lot. You can get a lot for 6 mana. You get a 6/6 creature or whatever. You get
Yeah.
something. You get something pretty sweet.
Yep. I don't
Um,
like it. I'm out on Obelisk. Like maybe some unique deck that I could think of, but just as a value card, I don't think it's worth it.
Yeah, this is the card that I'm only playing if my deck is screaming, play me, because it's, I either randomly ended up with lots of stuff in the same thing, or more likely, I'm playing the Triplicate Spirits deck and I have like 3 copies of Triplicate Spirits and 2 copies of Raise the Alarm. And then I could see that being playable in that situation.
Okay. What do you
So,
give it?
D.
D? Did we
Yeah,
just echo each other?
we did.
Okay. What about Perilous Vault? What does that do?
This is an artifact for 4. It's a mythic,
Ooh.
and it has 5 tap, exile it, exile all non-land permanents.
So blow up the world.
Blow up the world.
Wow,
Get
in a
out, world.
big way.
Yeah.
So how
Um,
do you use this effectively unlimited?
this is just a board sweeper, which is one is you can just plop this down and be like, well, if things get bad, this is what we're doing, right? We're getting out
Mm-hmm.
of that situation. Two is it's pretty nice because it's a wrath effect, kill all the creatures basically that you can do during their end step, which means you get to be the first person to start retooling, which is pretty important.
Oh, that's a big deal because
That
that's one of
is
my biggest knocks on Wraths.
right, which is
Is that you have to do it on your turn. They play a creature, and now you're like tempo behind.
exactly. So, um, I mean, they get to see it coming because it's unlikely you're gonna have 9 to be like play sacrifice, right?
Right.
So they're gonna see it coming, but just the fact that you get to do it first is pretty nice. I don't know. I just like
Doesn't
having
affect the board. It has the thing of like you're the one who's using the card on that effect. So like
yeah,
they
yep.
might just be beating you down. How do you grade that? Like I don't really know where to put Perilous Vault.
I mean, it's also kind of cool because it's like you just play this, and it's like all of a sudden it starts limiting what they can do. They can't go all out on you. They have to be very careful because if they start committing more than you do, you just blow it up. So
Now, one thing I don't like about it though is that they do get to see it coming kind of no matter what. I mean, you're not going to have 9 mana very often.
mhm.
And also, you don't do anything the turn that you play it, right? You're like 4 mana, go.
Right.
Then they're like, oh, well, I was way ahead of you, and I'm going to get 3 for 1 here, but I'll hit you with all my things because you didn't play anything that affected the board. And then you have to be like, land, go. And then they're like, attack with everything. And you're like, okay, fine, blow up my Perilous Vault because I don't want to take another hit from all of your creatures. And then they're like, second main, play a creature, go.
Right. Yeah, you may have to. You may
Like
have to
if
do
you're
it
way
during
behind.
combat.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Like
may have to do it
that's
during
not
combat.
every scenario, but that is a scenario that will pop up.
Yeah, for sure.
Pretty
I don't
clunky, man. I mean, that's a lot of mana. And even if you get it in the installment plan, we're still talking 9 mana here.
Yeah, I know universally I'm a bigger fan of Wraths than you are, so I'm
You
going to
are.
give it a higher grade than you will most likely.
Yeah. I'm having it. Like, I like some of it though. I really like what you said about end stepping it when the scenario arrives. Like, there's one I described as a realistic one where you don't get that luxury, but I can see ones where you do. So
Right.
it's not. I'm definitely intrigued by this card, but I'm not. I'm not super stoked on it either.
It's kind of cool that it's like you have your finger on the nuclear button and your opponent just has to like stare at you and it's like, is it okay if I play this thing more? Is it okay? It just puts them in an awkward spot.
It does. What do
Where
you give it?
I gave it a B. I think it's pretty cool. I don't think it's a bomb, but
You're out of your mind.
well, maybe that's true. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I was going to start it off at D.
So you would not main deck Perilous Vault.
Right.
Wow.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Maybe.
I'm having a hard time imagining how I get way ahead with this.
I mean, why does every card have to get you way ahead to be playable?
It doesn't. And maybe you just get a little bit ahead. I don't know. But in order to make it a B, like I'm expecting to get way ahead.
I mean, I like cards that it's like my opponent did something crazy broken, and all of a sudden that thing doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
Like they played.
I'm going to start off with D, and then we'll work our way up from there. I think that like I'm not auto including this in every deck until I see it do awesome stuff or until I figure it out.
All right.
We'll keep an eye on that one.
I mean, it's a mythic. We probably won't see it too often.
No, but I mean, when we do,
Yeah.
What about? I mean, it's a kind of card where like it'll stand out. It'll either be terrible or really good. So, what about Phyrexian Revoker?
All right, this is a reprint, and it's a 2-mana artifact creature horror for a 2/1, and it has, as it comes into play, you name a non-land card, and activated abilities with that name cannot be activated.
So, what do you think about this for limited? Right, we've got a 2/1 for 2 colorless, which is okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then it can randomly shut off something, though there's probably not going to be like always a target.
Yeah,
I don't mean target literally, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. This M15 has more activated abilities on permanents than any set I can remember in the recent past.
There are a lot.
Since like New World Order happened, like this set has a lot. I mean, obviously like at Rare there's like the souls and stuff, but just like all the Paragons have abilities. Man, like tons of cards that we reviewed here, but even at Uncommon, you have the whole cycle of the off-color lands matters cards. Like the Kurd Chieftain and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like being able to shut down those cards is super relevant.
Yeah, all the Paragons you said, yeah.
Yeah, and you just get to put in the spot of, all right, this is the spot that would normally be occupied by Runeclaw Bears, and now it's occupied by this thing. So, I don't know. I think that's a big upgrade.
How high do you pick a Phyrexian Revoker?
Not super high.
Right, you kind of pick it up in the middle of the pack somewhere, and you're like, sure.
Yeah. Like in Cube Draft, this is one of my favorite cards. I love this. But in regular M15 Draft, I'm gonna give it like a C or a C plus.
I think it's a C plus, right? It's like a slightly worse bear, but with a reasonable upside that could be really big.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you're Haunted Plaint Mail. Now it does nothing.
Right. Read this next card. This card's cool.
Scuttling Doom Engine.
Yeah.
Artifact creature construct for 6 mana. It's a 6/6.
Wow.
Scuttling Doom Engine cannot be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. And it has, when Scuttling Doom Engine dies, it deals 6 damage to target opponent.
Is there anything else? Like, that's just all upside.
This thing thrashes. Like,
wow, it's a 6/6 for 6 colorless?
Yeah, this thing is made for destruction. Like, and it's, when it dies, they take 6.
And they can't chump it, basically.
Yeah, they can't chump it, which means they're going to have to like throw some real bodies in front of it. I don't know. This thing is
they have them.
Yeah, this is just like an awesome way to close out a game.
Holy crap, this card's good.
Yeah. I would love to play this in any aggressive deck. I mean, I'm going to play Scuttling Doom Engine in any deck, but like
it doesn't have to attack every turn. Like, what am I missing here?
I don't know. It's like the ideal 6-drop for something aggressive though, where you're like, all right, you stabilized. All right, deal with this.
Man, this is a sweet pack one pick one as well because it's colorless.
Absolutely.
Jeez, Scuttling Doom Engine, that thing rocks.
Yeah, I think it's really, really good.
Like, I'm tempted to give it like an A- or a B+ here.
I gave it an A-. I just think, I mean, one, it's because
colorless.
you just put it in any deck, and it can't ever be that bad, right?
It like super crushes the vanilla test. You don't necessarily get 6/6s for 6 even in green, and let alone the other colors, like,
Yeah.
unless they're like mythic rares or something.
Yeah. I don't know. I think
Jeez, that card's good. I'm impressed. I'm gonna give it an A minus.
okay. There we go. Scuttling Doom Engine A minus.
Yeah. What's next?
Shield of the Avatar. This is an equipment. It costs 1 to play and 2 to equip, and it has if a source would deal damage to equipped creature, prevent X of that damage, where X is the number of creatures you control. So it's really
good
getting
to equip.
2 to equip. So 3 mana total to get that thing onto something. Really is going to make your thing, fairly impervious to damage.
How good is that?
In my opinion, not very good.
Yeah, it kind of depends on the thing, right? Ugh. Man, I like my equipment to help me win the game, like make my thing, make my creature like huge, or like give it death, like something that affects combat more than, like, if they just have a bigger creature than you, then this just doesn't really matter, right?
Right.
Well, I mean, I guess it makes your creature block better, which does make sense since it's a shield, but
Yeah, I mean,
no, I'm having a hard
yeah.
time justifying a whole card slot on a card like this.
Yeah, I really feel like something more proactive is almost always the right call.
I'm not a
Um,
big fan.
no, I mean, I don't really see a lot of, high power, like low toughness stuff that you can like abuse with it, to kind of like,
Right.
here's my 5/1 creature for 3, something weird like that to make this happen. Um, I don't know. Yeah, I don't like equipment that doesn't grant power or something like more threatening.
Yeah.
It's like,
Agreed.
okay, I'll take the damage.
Yeah, I don't think this is a great card. This is probably like a D.
I give it a D.
Ooh, speaking of great cards, this next one.
Yeah, this is the one I had 2 of at the
I had
pre-release.
one. I thought I was cool until I
No.
found out that you had 2. People at
Uh,
my store were like whispering about it, about you having 2 of these.
oh yeah, I tweeted that out.
Yeah.
Soul of New Phyrexia, 6 drop, 6 for a 6/6. That's a theme today.
Yeah.
Artifact creature avatar. It has trample, so so already it's Vulpine Goliath plus.
Right.
For 5
For
mana,
colorless.
yeah, for colorless. 5 mana, permanents you control gain indestructible until end of turn.
All of them.
All of them.
Interesting.
And it has the soul ability, so you can pay 5 and exile it from your graveyard to give all your stuff indestructible until end of turn.
So if you get to untap, like, how good of a spot are you in here?
Pretty good one. Basically, it's a sweet strike force. My deck had some of those dogs that get +2/+0 and trample if you have an artifact.
Mm-hmm.
So
This was the artifact here.
yeah, this is the artifact. So I attack with that.
Oh my
I attack
God.
with the soul. Now that's 11 power of trample. You can make some really bad chump blocks, or you can take 11, but you're not killing my stuff.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. That is
So,
just dumb.
yeah, and that's not even like a crazy scenario, right? It's like
No,
this.
I mean,
Yeah.
once you have the soul, it's not.
Yeah,
Is it a
uh,
Phyrexian wearing Elish Norn's hat, by the way?
it looks like it. They're buddies.
How rude. They're not buddies. Wow.
Oh, they're not.
No.
Yeah, this thing thrashes. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really know what else to say about it. Like, to me, this is a classic A. Like, it doesn't stabilize the board in some of the ways that we talked about with flyers or blocking incredibly well. But, like, this is just a full-on bomb. It's colorless. Like, that's a big deal. You just windmill this first pick. You're open on colors. You can go many directions. This is good in all different types of decks. This is a great curve topper for aggro. It's a fine finisher. I mean, I think the indestructible thing is sometimes really good, like in scenarios where you described, and other times it's like, whatever, I still just have the biggest thing on the board with trample, and I'm just going to kill you with it.
Yeah. I mean,
I'd give it an A minus, I suppose.
yeah, I'll give it A- too. Like if you're on defense, I mean, it's basically Vulpine Goliath, right? Like, I mean, that's not bad, but unless you're actually
For colorless, like, it's a blue Vulpine Goliath. Or,
sure, absolutely,
you know,
yeah, or black or whatever.
black one, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, unless you're really like leveraging and making stuff indestructible on offense, it's not super crazy, right? It only blocks one thing. It doesn't have like life link or anything like that, right? So
Yeah.
If you're losing to triplicate spirits, you're still losing to triplicate spirits, like. So I think that keeps it from being a straight A.
I
So
think you're right. A minus.
I give it A minus. Yeah.
Great card though. Why don't we cover all of the Pain lands in one shot here? We've got Battlefield Forge, Caves of Koilos, Llanowar Waste, Shivan Reef, and Yavimaya Coast.
Yeah, so these lands all tap to produce colorless or tap to produce two colors of mana. And in this set, we have the enemy colors. So
Yes.
white, red, white, black, green, black, etc. And if you tap to get colored mana, you take 1 damage.
I mean, they're not really high picks, but they can help
No.
splash. If you're in those two colors, I think you just always play them.
I don't know if I'd necessarily always play them in 2-color decks. I
Yeah,
think
because I mean, you can use the colorless really effectively in those type of decks.
fair. I guess you only would add the colorless if you just didn't have any other lands of that color.
Right.
So
The
I guess
color,
you're
you
okay.
mean? Yeah. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's like
Okay.
I would just put that in, but the damage matters. I think the thing to learn or to know about Pain lands is that uh, the damage does matter. If you have to tap it for that color of mana repeatedly, the damage can add up. If you're using it as a splash, that's great, no problem. You know, you can get away with that pretty easily.
Mhm.
They're fine, right? They're middle ground picks. They can help smooth out some types of decks, but they're rare, so you're not going to get multiples of them very often. So you can't just build some, 3 or 4 color monstrosity deck that's, whatever that you're trying to go off with these. They just don't see them that often.
Right. So like, where am I picking it? If I'm playing 3 colors, then maybe I'm picking it like a C plus, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
Because you need fixing always when you're doing that. But if you're just playing your average 2-color deck, it's like a C.
You don't even need them. I mean, yeah, this like
Yeah.
if you happen to pick one up late in the
Yeah.
pack,
C
you
or C
run it.
minus.
Yeah.
Right. That kind of thing.
Yeah. What about Sliver Hive? That's an interesting land.
All right. So this is a land that produces colorless or tapped at 1 mana of any color to your mana pool that you can only spend on slivers.
Okay.
And it also has 5 tap. Put a 1/1 colorless sliver creature token onto the battlefield, but you can only do so if you already control a sliver.
It's just like, yeah, it's bad. I mean, it stinks because, like, I was like, okay, tap to add a colorless, that's not that exciting. Tap to add 1 mana as long as it's spent on a sliver. I'm like, well, I probably won't have any, or maybe I'll have like 1 in my deck, so that's not exciting. But then when you got to the last thing, I thought, well, maybe we can just run this as something that says 5 tap, make a 1/1 whatever, but you got to have a sliver. So, like, it just sort of takes it out of the running completely. I mean, basically, like in your average deck, it just does nothing.
Yeah, if this was in a set where slivers was more of a thing, it would be very good.
It would be sick.
It would be so good. The fact that there's only 5 slivers, they're uncommon. A lot of them aren't very good at all.
One's a mythic.
So I think there's 2 that that'd be somewhat excited to play. So I'm gonna start the Death Touch one in green.
Yeah.
That's okay. And if you get to make more Death Touch things, like that's probably worth tossing in a Sliver Hive in your deck if you got 1 or 2 of those. The one I'm actually excited about though is Constricting Sliver.
That's the white one?
That's the Oblivion Ring Sliver.
Yeah.
So if you have Constricting Sliver in play, you just spend 5 tap and you exile something.
Yeah.
It's absurd. So if you have Constricting Sliver, definitely play Sliver Hive. If you have the Death Touch one, maybe consider it. And the other 3 is like meh.
Yeah, you're probably not running the other 3 anyway.
Yeah. Probably not running the other 3. And like, even if you were running 1, like it might not be worth playing the Sliver Hive because you'd rather have a land that's always going to produce colored mana. That's important. These lands that make colorless mana, that's a downside.
Yes.
Sometimes you will color screw yourself because you didn't just put a forest or a swamp or whatever in your deck instead. Like that is a significant downside.
I think I saw somebody with 2 or 3 of the gain 2 life land.
Yeah, not a fan.
At the pre-release, and I was like, dude, you're a gambler, huh? He's, oh, it's free. I'm like, sit down, son. Let's have a chat. But this counts in that same vein. Yeah, but I mean, for what I'm considering, this is like a D or D minus or whatever. Like, it's just not a card that's going to be relevant very often.
Yeah, I don't know. I gave it a D, but if I have a Constricting Sliver, I'll put it in my deck.
Yeah. Okay, last card.
Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth.
Not super exciting for this format. There's no... Well, just read it. Some people probably don't know what it does.
So it's a legendary land, and it says each land, including yours and your opponent's, is a swamp in addition to its other land types.
Yeah. Interestingly, Urborg doesn't have any other text, so like it doesn't technically tap for mana, but since it's on the battlefield, it makes itself a swamp, and can tap for black, which is really kind of cool.
Yeah, so just real quick, this card has some upsides, some downsides. The downside is that it makes your opponent's land swamps. So if they were splashing a black card or just were playing black and didn't have black mana yet, you just enabled them to have that.
Yeah.
The upside for you is that it makes all of your lands tap for black, which could be relevant. So if you had a card that costs maybe 2 black, right? This is better than a swamp because this will enable you to cast it even if this is your only black source, right? Because all your things will not make black. So there aren't really. I don't think there's any swamps matters cards.
Yeah, there's no corrupt or anything.
Yeah,
no
so
tendrils,
there's nothing to make this awesome, right? But if you're playing a deck with multiple things that cost more than 1 black mana, you might as well put it in your deck.
I think so too. Yeah. This is not a risky card to put in your deck.
No, it's a legendary land. So if you had 2, they might kill each other.
Yeah,
so
just play 1.
Just play 1, because the upside is super limited. But like I said, yeah, if you have a couple things in your deck that cost more than one black mana, then go ahead and run it.
Yeah, I think so too. Not a high pick though, unless it's worth something or whatever. It's just not a. Its impact is neither very high nor very low. It's just sort of one of those like, a little bit better than a swamp in some spots. Maybe you hook your opponent up with like a land that they needed or whatever, but not that often.
Yeah, you're more likely to cast your Sign in Blood on turn 2 or something like that. That's really the limited upside you're looking at.
Yeah, but it doesn't enter the battlefield tapped or anything, so there's just no downside along those lines.
Right. So it's like a C-. I don't know.
Yeah. D, whatever. Like,
yeah,
if you can put it C, I guess. It just doesn't do much. So,
right.
All right, that's going to do it for M15 Rares and Mythics. Lots of exciting stuff, I have to say. They kind of went all out on the rare section. We had those game designer cards that we had in there, and the Cycle of Souls, which are kind of interesting. And then they really went high and low. I mean, we started with Hushwing Griff early, which is kind of like a cute, interesting card, but we saw huge stuff, right? I mean, Garrick's Apex Predator is massive. Some interesting takes on a lot of different things. And I'm really curious to see if this format is going to end up being a Prince or a Pauper format. We had BDM to talk about that once, where, the Prince format is more of the bomb heavy type things. The really important big cards are the ones that win, and a Pauper format's more where like the commons can kind of take over and group up in hordes to win. And I'm really curious to see what we have. We got some really beefy rares here though.
Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting, hard to evaluate cards.
Yeah, for sure.
There's really a lot going on. It doesn't seem like an especially synergy-driven set. Like, it's not like, oh, this is like a build around me rare, No. But it's still going to be like, it's going to take some time to see, okay, like I'm playing a green-red deck. How good is this card? How good is that card?
Yep.
I don't know. I'm excited to find out.
6 Planeswalkers in this set. I mean, take a look at your average big set, and it has like, what, 2?
2.
Yeah. So there's going to be more Planeswalkers floating around. That's something to keep our eye on, too. All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out with us for to culminate our M15 set review here with the Rare and Mythic show. If you'd like to send us an email for feedback, you can do so, lr@lrcast.com. Very easy. Another very easy thing to do is follow us on Twitter. If you'd like to chat, you can ask a quick question. It's a really great place to get a hold of us because it's nice and quick, super easy. And it's Marshall_LR for me and Brian_LR for Brian. Highly recommended. If you're into Magic and you're not on Twitter, I feel like you're missing out. Like, there's a lot of things going on. You can really tailor it to what you want it to be. You can follow cool people. You can unfollow jerks. It's not this friend thing like on Facebook where you have to feel weird about it. Highly recommended for Magic players is Twitter for sure. If you would like to join the Limited Resources clan on Magic Online, you can do so. Send me a message, Marshall_LR, and I'll get you an invite. It's pretty straightforward. You cannot be a jerk, and you must love Magic. That's it. If you meet those requirements, you can be in the clan. And you can follow at LRCube on Twitter to find out about the Limited Resources Cube as well. Those are being ran by David and Lee as well. So check out those for sure. And last but not least, for all things Limited Resources, including a link to our YouTube channel. Did you know that we have a YouTube channel? We do. You can find all of that stuff on lrcast.com. Guys, thanks for hanging out. We'll see you next week.
So how about those 5-hour set reviews?
Whew, yeah.
It's really a labor of love. Yes, sirree. Yeah, I think we'd be doing this even if we weren't recording, right?
Sure, yeah.
You sound a little parched, Marshall. I think you could use some water. Why not go to the kitchen and pour yourself a glass with ice? Really, I insist.
Yeah, actually, that does sound good. I'll be right back.
Okay. I'll be right here. Hello, my name is Brian Wong. Marshall is holding me against my will. He said if I didn't record our longest set review ever, that I would never see my family again. Please send someone soon. I'm very scared. The address is 2215 East Adams Street.